the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. And we're going to start right off this morning with the regular agenda. First item is a rezone petition. It's to consider a rezone petition for Buffalo Bend from low-density residential to medium-density residential. The site is generally located in the northeast quarter of Section 3, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 3.5 acres. At this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Morning.
Good morning.
My name is Neil Messer, and I'm here this morning on behalf of myself and my partner Steve Schwab to request your approval to rezone the what will eventually be proposed as the Buffalo Bend subdivision from low density to medium density residential. The property is north of 4th Street East on 10th Avenue East, up to about 7th or 8th Street on the left-hand side of the road. A lot of you may probably remember it as the old Huff property. And we have Ray Long as the current owner. We are under contract to own it, and Ray has sold off the single-family home that is there. If you know, familiar with the area, so it's bordered on the south by some R3 zoning, and if you look at your plat, it bordered on the west and north by the drainage area, and behind that is Custer Street, which dumps into, I believe it's 8th Street. It's part of a bigger plan that is also on your agenda today to do a preliminary plat, which you have in front of you in your packet. Our plan, I don't know if I should go into the plan on the lots, but our plan basically is there's 12 lots there. One of them is already occupied by the existing residents that Ray Long owned, and the other 11 lots, there are 5 lots which a square footage of above 10,000, which would allow us, our plan would to try to put twin homes on those lots, and the other 6 lots which are less than 10,000 square feet, our plan would be to put single family residences on those lots. I guess I would stand for any questions if necessary.
Any questions at this time for Mr. Messer? Could you give us the dimensions on the drive going in and the cul-de-sac, the turnaround inside this piece of property?
Yeah, I do have that. I'll pull it out for you. Okay, 66 is the street width, and then 122 is the overall, the widest dimension on the cul-de-sac.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Tu.
Mr. Messer, where is this Ray Long's property here?
Way in the corner of that lot 12.
Where's he going to access, from here or here?
He has access off of 10th Avenue East.
Okay.
When it's all said and done, Mr. Messer, you would expect this drive and turnaround in there to be public property then? Would be a public drive? Would that be a privately maintained drive?
No, we'd request that as public.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward.
Which ones would be the telephone?
Come on up, ma'am, please. You can feel comfortable. It's okay. It's all right. So just let us know who you are and your address, and,
Debbie Krebs, and it's 590 9th Avenue East.
okay.
And I'm just wondering which ones are the townhouses. Please.
So there's this one, this one, and these two.
Okay,
So we have to dedicate this as a empty tract for
Right.
stormwater sewer. So-
I was just wondering, because I'm over here and I
Yeah.
don't want that in my backyard. Okay.
Redesign the lots or whatever. Well, the ones that are under a certain size, well, you can reshape everything. You know.
Isn't it 10,000 square feet?
Mr. Corton, could you clarify that, that if that's not set in stone, that could be varied, changed, redrawn?
Absolutely. The R2 zoning district allows townhouses. Depending on the configuration of the townhouse, you're allowed to, if you have the density per the lot, which many times people will come back and combine lots, you can have up to 4 units. If they are 2 on top and 2 below, or 4 that are interconnected, you also have the ability in the zoning code in the R2 zone to go up to 10 units as a row townhouse design, in which you would have to have the density for that. An example is the first unit, 7,000 square feet, and each subsequent one would have to be at 3,000. So to put a fourplex on the lot, you would need to have a lot size of 16,000 square feet. So there's no guarantee that, there's nothing that we could place as conditions on the rezoning portion to prohibit anything above a 2 or a 3. I just want everybody to be aware of that. If they aggregated or combined several of the lots, it could go from a 2 to a 4 to a 6. That being said, that's not the development expectation, but there's nothing prohibiting either in the code.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. If there's anyone else who would like to make comment, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning. My name's Daniel Kronk. I live at 329 10th Avenue East, which is just south of this proposed petition here today. And my main concern would be the drainage area, which is north of this proposed petition. If this is approved, will that drainage adjustment or improvement be a cost to the city, or is that going to be incurred by the developer? Yes. I know this is just a preliminary, but is there any thoughts on that, or is that going to be a special assessment to residents of 10th Avenue East, which is one of my concerns?
Thank you for your concern.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. If there's anyone else who would like to make comment, please feel free to come forward. Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I could just comment on the last public comment. There will not be any special assessments. The stormwater will have to be contained on site. That existing drainage area was part of a prior plat. There will not be additional improvements that the city will need to do. It will be borne by the developer.
Thank you. Mr. Josephson.
I'm just going to add some comments very quickly. Steve Josephson, City of Dickinson staff. Just a couple things I wanted to make you aware of is as the applicant was saying, there is a piece of property here which was owned by Mr. Long. That is not part of the rezoning. So that's not part of the rezoning. That's being left out. We did look at this site and felt that with the drainage ditch as the applicant said, to the northwest, that created a separation from the single family subdivision, in the Washington subdivision, that there's already R3 zoning to the south of this, and this is actually less, could result in less density than that. And this is a case of infill development, where you've got, this is one of the few, what appears to be one of the few unplatted lots left in the city. And rather than having to extend any utilities out to it, There, you know, it's already serviced by water and sewer. This would be an opportunity to fill in a lot, you know, that's already there, and that's already vacant. And as, you know, as was said before in terms of the drainage issue, that is something that's taken care of by the developer, and that would be held on site. The one thing I would say is that the preliminary subdivision plat that you're going to look at afterwards is dependent upon this rezoning. Should this rezoning fail, then the preliminary plat would either have to be denied, withdrawn, or they'd have to continue it in order to reconfigure it to match the R1 zoning that's currently on the property. So please bear that in mind as you consider this.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Krieg?
probably more comment towards the plat, but I continue to hear that the Department of Health is coming out with more rules and regulations on dead end of water lines. So something that we might want to request in the plat stage would be to put an easement so they can loop that water line into another water line coming off of one of the adjacent streets.
Thank you, Mr. Krieg. Any other comments at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
we have park requirements taken care of?
We took cash in lieu, I believe, just basically due on the size of the property.
Any other comments at this time? If being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Krieg?
I'll move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning recommend approval of the proposed rezoning from R1 to R2.
This motion, is there a second? Second by Mr. Hanson. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Rezone petition recommended. Thank you very much. We'll continue on here. Item 2 is related to our first item. It's a preliminary plat. It's considered a preliminary plat for the Buffalo Bend. The site is generally located in the northeast quarter of Section 3, Township 139 North, Range 96 West, and this site is approximately 4.4 acres. So at this time, I'd ask the party presenting.
Okay, under item number 2, what we're asking for is approval of the preliminary plat, which encompasses the area that you just took action on, in addition to what is described as Lot 12 in the southeast corner of that plat. So I won't take up any more of your time and stand for a question.
This time, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Messer? And all the property owners on this have agreed to, there's no objection from any of the property
Right.
owners to the
Yes.
additional
Right.
7/10 of an acre, or whatever it was.
Right.
8. If there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this preliminary plat, please feel free to come forward. Glad to hear your comments. Anyone from the commission wish to make comment? I had just a question on the walkways along 10th there. Is there anybody looking forward to what is going to be proposed for that, for Con, do you know? Is there-
Mr. Chairman,
is
are
there
you
gonna be-
referring to sidewalks
Yes, will
along
it be
10th?
maintained as like it will be? Because now there'll be an extensive drive going into there.
They'll be required to have sidewalks along 10th Street. That's part of our current code, yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, yes. Steve Josephson, city staff. And as I said previously, this is the replat of that entire parcel. It includes the parcel that you just recommended approval for and rezoning, and then a separate, the separate parcel, which is on the southwest corner. There are two proposed conditions to the proposed preliminary plat, and if I heard Commissioner Krieg right, it sounded like the potential for another. What staff is proposing as a condition to be addressed at final plat approval is prior to adoption of the final plat, a final stormwater management plan shall be reviewed and approved by the city engineer, and that prior to approval of the final plat, a final subdivision agreement shall be approved by the city after hearings before the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Commission. Now, my understanding was, Commissioner Krieg, you were talking about having a condition about looping the water system, the water
line.
Okay. So I'm just trying to think of our phrasing for that.
If I could, I suppose the condition should be that engineering staff review the need for looping.
Mhm. Yeah, that'd be fine.
We don't know
I mean,
how.
I think I'm just hearing there's additional testing on dead-end lines, and it's going to create a big burden on the city if we don't loop and fire protection, everything else.
I would ask if the applicant had any objections to that proposed condition. And that's, I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Oh, I will add two things to this. We did send this out for staff review, and I know that the applicant had acted on widening the size of the cul-de-sac in order to accommodate comments that were received from the city fire department. This was also sent to MDU, and they had asked for some lighting easements, and they also accommodated those comments by including those easements in there. I sent the revised preliminary plat to both parties, and they looked at it and said that they felt that met their comments. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer any other questions you may have pertaining to staff report.
Any questions for Mr. Josephson?
Ms. Josephson, regarding the drainage, did somebody, or is there a need to review a flood study on that, or?
They will have to do, they've already submitted a preliminary stormwater management plan, and then prior to final plat approval, that would require the approval of, they're going to submit a final stormwater plan, so they'll be working with the city engineering department on that. As you can see from the plat, they had designated on the northwest side a tract, and that tract is supposed to function as the drainage facility for the site, where it says Tract 1.
And I guess I'm referring to, the existing drainage building in the 100-year flood zone, things like that.
Did not have any indication that this was in the in the 100-year in the 100-year floodplain, unless the applicant knows otherwise. They're supposed to identify that as part of the plat, and I will let the applicant address that.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Any further comments? Anyone else have a comment from the commission?
On the drainage ditch issue, well, I live right beside the drainage ditch, so I've got a question. Does that cause me a problem over there? I'm on the high side.
No.
My neighbor's on.
No, it will not. Thank you. Would you like to address that further?
We will be including a stormwater management facility on our site, which will detain our runoff back to historic rates. So there will be no increase in that drainage ditch, and also we will not be affecting any of the grades or anything along that drainage ditch. So that will be staying as it is now. You should see no effect from our development.
And that was from Mr. Andrew Schenk. Thank you.
Yes, sorry.
Engineer. Any other comments? This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion. With the
with the
Two
staff,
conditions.
yeah,
Yep.
recommendations.
Been a motion by Mr. Hanson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Mr. Tews. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Preliminary plat recommended. Thank you very much.
Chairman Abramson, it's past 7:30. There may have been some people who showed up believing that there was a Board of Adjustment meeting today at 7:30. If there's anybody who's shown up for that, Mr. Croton would be willing to meet with them out in the hallway to discuss. So if there's anybody here who came for the lot width reduction, please raise your hand, and Mr. Croton will meet with you outside of the commission chambers if you wish to discuss that.
Anyone have any questions on that? The Board of Adjustments had posted a time or place erroneously on one site. If you feel we can take care of that better than the Board of Adjustments, we'll be glad to. But Mr. Croton would be glad to meet with you. Is there anyone here for that? That needs to raise a
It was in
question?
Gress's subdivision. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Item 3 on the regular agenda is a rezone petition. It's to consider a rezoning petition from medium-density residential for a planned unit development for office uses. The site is located on lots 1 through 3 of the Kaczynski subdivision. Site is approximately 3/4 of an acre. At this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning, my name is Chuck Olson. I'm here representing Consolidated. I work for Endeavor Engineering. What we have here is, or what we're requesting is to create a PUD on lots 1, 2, and 3 of the Kaczynski addition. It's located along 5th Street Southeast, directly east of Gaffney's Floral, which is commercial, community commercial, and northeast from the Consolidated main building, which is also community commercial. This is in an area of R2, and what we'd want to do is build a building, get the zoning changed so that we could build a building which would house their computer tech department, which is already housed inside their Consolidated building directly across the street. The intent of this building would be for restricted access. It would not be for public access. There would be nobody coming in to get their computer repaired or anything along that lines. It would be all internal, so it would be much along the lines of existing Consolidated buildings where they have, like your city, you have restricted access into the building, and the Consolidated building that's a block south of here where you have restricted access. The area already has existing water and sewer lines running to it. As requested, we sent out letters to everybody within 400 feet. We received no comments back on the letters. All of Lot 1 will be utilized for the parking. Required parking is 13 spaces, and we have like 13 in the parking lot, 2 in the garage, and 2 in the driveway. All of Lot 3 will be left for the open space, and that's where our stormwater will be taken care of at. And we're trying to sit the building entirely on Lot 2.
Could you describe the building itself? Is it going to look similar to what you
Yes,
have
that was
when
one
you
of the
put it down?
requests from engineering department, and if you, in your packet, we have a rendering of what the building would look like, and we would try to maintain consistency with what we've got in that neighborhood, which is going to be using siding and the brick facade. It'll be a stick-built building, so it'll still look a lot like what's around it. So it's not going to look like we're not going to build a 2 or 3 story building there. It's going to be a single-story building with an attached garage on the side of it, and that would be on the west side towards Gaffney's. And it'll have a single front door, and it's not going to be, double doors or anything like that. But so that's, the rendering is in the packet that you have, and it's going to be shingle construction, shingles instead of a steel roof or anything like that.
Thank you.
Any questions at this time?
Any questions for Mr. Olson at this time? Any comments? Thank you very much. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Mr. Khan or Mr. Josephson, do you have any comments on this one?
Steve Josephson, City of Dickinson staff. As the applicant had stated, this is a request for a planned unit development. The site is about 3/4 of an acre. It's currently zoned medium-density residential. And the concern that staff did have when Mr. Olson approached us about this was making something that in terms of intensity and appearance would not conflict with the existing residential out there. And they have, as Mr. Olson mentioned in his presentation, the building exterior design that they presented does appear residential in nature, so it will be built in accordance with that. They've restricted the hours of operation to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. If people need to come in on the weekend and do a little work, that's okay, but it would be just normal business. It would be normal business hours. They are also providing a common area on the north side that would be adjacent to the residential and would serve as a transition area, a buffer between the office use and the existing residential that's out there. And they're also proposing to provide landscaping too. So staff has reviewed this and feel that they've done significant things to mitigate the impact of an office use. And the use is also restricted to just what they have asked for. So instead of a broad range of office or commercial uses, it's restricted merely to that use. We propose adoption of this subject to the 6 conditions, which include that they have to follow the what's in the planned unit development package, that all access shall be approved by the city engineer, that they, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, landscaping will be installed along each roadway and on the site in accordance with the city's landscape ordinance as well as their landscaping plan. No activity shall occur until a stormwater management has been approved by the city. And the last one, that any development there is in compliance with the PUD and all city and state and whatever regulations. So staff recommends approval of the planned unit development, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Josephson at this time? Any conditions on lighting on this? Do you know?
No, there are no conditions. There are no conditions on lighting. Is the concern that lighting on the parking lot be limited to certain hours, or that the type of lighting?
This so that lighting isn't going, off the property, and bothering the neighborhood. That's all. Okay.
We don't have that on there. We could conceivably, work with the applicant on something for lighting, maybe something where the light poles, where the lighting is fully shielded and only illuminates the parking lot area.
I know.
Is that what you're looking at, Mr. Chairman?
Right. So it's not bothersome to the rest of the neighborhood, but I know they're very considerate. I mean, Consolidated, when they did their other building, came in for a change in zoning or a special request at that time and did an extremely responsible job with their facility right now. That's to the south of Gaffney's. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're extremely responsible. But in the nature of their business and their stuff, I know they have security concerns, and they like to have some lighting that makes their building secure because they're dealing with a lot of transfer of information.
We could put a condition on that essentially says that all lighting will be confined to the site.
You planners have a term for that. And Mr. Corton?
The term that I would use would be all lighting have to be approved by the city, by the community development director. And then they
Yeah.
could challenge my decision and bring it back to you if they disagree with my rendering or decision with respect to that. 10-foot, 15-foot lights are reasonable with that. You could place timers that afterwards that they go out unless they need to be there for 24-hour periods. But if you want to put it to that, we can ensure that either through a photometric study or the light would stay on site. And if we cannot agree to terms, we can bring it back to you to ultimately make the decision.
I bring this up because right now our lighting ordinance is in a little bit in limbo.
Mhm.
And so.
Understood. Understood. Well, I'd ask the applicant if they wish to comment on that. That seems to me a reasonable, a reasonable condition.
Thank you.
But I'll ask the applicant, Mr. Olson, if what his comment is on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Consolidated would be fine with doing something along that lines, even with a time, so it can go off after 6 o'clock at night or something like that, so it doesn't disturb the surrounding community.
Sure.
And that's the other reason that we put that parking lot on the west side, because it would abut another business and minimize that to begin with. So, but definitely having time lights.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? This time I'd ask if there's anyone else in the public who would like to make comment on this. Please feel free to come forward. And we'd like to hear your comments. Anyone from the commission? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Coos?
I move that the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of proposed rezoning from R2 to planned unit development, subject to the conditions listed above, and with the addition of Mr. Josephson's lighting condition.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Krieg. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carried. Recommended. Thank you, Mr. Olson. Item 4 on the regular agenda is a rezone petition. It's to consider a rezoning petition from a general commercial to a high-density residential for 5 lots generally located on the south side of Aldrich Street, the west side of 8th Avenue East. The site is approximately 1 acre. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Good morning. Nainetta Wandler, Everett Real Estate. I represent the homeowners on the south side of Aldrich, and there is one property on 8th Avenue East. The reason we're asking for the zoning to go back to residential is they can't sell their houses very easy because the banks won't allow reasonable financing on homes that are commercial. They have to come up with huge down payments, and interest rate is higher. So it's a detriment to these homeowners when they try to sell their house. And that is the reason why we're trying to get it back to R3. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Wandler?
Thank you.
Thank you. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone in public wish to make comment?
Yes, my name is Mark Verkota. I live on 746 Aldrich Street, and I would like very much for this to be considered. All of the people affected on that block have signed the petition. It was a unanimous for all the people there, and as Nainetta said. It does present a problem to people that are trying to buy or sell, being its own commercial right now. And the north side of the block would be residential, and the south side would remain commercial. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wandler, am I correct that Mr. Slavic is the owner of the property yet? Is a Mr. Keith Slavic,
Yes.
he is the owner of the property?
No, no.
He is-
Mr. Verkota is the owner of the
He
property.
he owns the property?
Yes.
And he's
He-
asking your agency?
Yes, I have the house listed, and we have a buyer, but because, like I said, because of the banking restrictions on a property, if the city could give a letter to say that they could always use it as a home, as long as somebody owns it, they can use it as a home. But say if the home were to burn down, the city isn't guaranteeing that they can rebuild it as a house. And mortgage lenders will not give a loan if it is not guaranteed to be rebuilt as a house.
Thank you for your clarification. Anyone else in the public wish to make comment at this time? Anyone on the commission wish to make comment? Mr. Josephson, would you like to make comment on this one?
Steve Josephson, City of Dickinson Planning Staff. And as Ms. Wandler put it, this is a case of where you have existing homes that were rezoned into nonconformity. They're uses that don't conform with the commercial zoning district that's been applied, that they're in. So if they were destroyed, if it was significant damage, they would not be able to rebuild. I know I've gone out and visited the site. The houses are oriented towards Aldrich. They're not oriented towards Villard, which is the commercial strip. Houses are well maintained. They definitely relate more to the existing residential development on the north side. This appears to be an established neighborhood. And there is a significant divide between those commercial properties that are oriented towards Villard and these homes. So this is an effort to correct a nonconformity. This area is not going commercial. It's staying residential. And I think here in Dickinson, we probably want to keep as much residential property, existing residential property as we can. So this is just a matter of making a change to the zoning map to reflect the actual use in that, the current and future use of that area.
Thank you.
I'm here to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Josephson?
Mr. Josephson, having said that, should we be looking at a bigger picture thing? I know it's not part of this petition, but should we be looking at more in that area?
You know, I would believe, and I've spoken to Mr. Corton about that, is there may have been cases where zoning was changed in the past and it may have affected other houses, other single-family residences where they've been rezoned into a case of where they're no longer conforming. And I believe this is one of the things we talked about looking at, you know, now that we've got the comprehensive plan behind us and we've got some other projects coming up, and this is something that we can certainly look at is those, you know, residential areas where they've been inappropriate, where the zoning is inappropriate. You know, we want to preserve, if they are viable single-family homes, we want to preserve that and encourage that. So, you know, that's something staff will be discussing and looking at in the next few months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Corton, this generally fits in, no, it's a 1 acre. It fits in with what the comprehensive plan is going in, is a direction of what, you know, even it's one little parcel.
The block itself is, you know, that area is part of the comp plan. We would need to do an amendment to that, but this process started prior to the adoption of the comp plan. And as part of the comp plan, the consistency element was waived for a year for everybody to get comfortable and feel. So there's not a necessary requirement at this point for them to do. In essence, if this came in today, we would come with a rezoning and a comprehensive plan map amendment to change that block from commercial to residential. But the land uses in the area, the historic land uses are residential. The people are using them as residential due to our housing shortage that we have in the city. It makes sense to continue that, or at least provide them with the ability. When the letter originally came in from the realtor, we stated in our letter that we could allow that use to stay in perpetuity. However, we could not put the extension that if it burned down, that it could be rebuilt. So we provided the option, as I've done before, where if you can get that block together, if they're all in agreement, then, and the standard is residential, it's on the periphery, which this one was, across the street is residential, then it would make sense to do it that way. But we're looking at, instead of doing them case by case, as Mr. Joseph has talked about, to do an amendment to our code to come to you and allow, either through a special use permit or allow it outright to have residential uses in certain commercial zones. We would probably depict it on a map and probably have a overlay district to address that. There's various mechanisms you can use, and that's one of the things that we would like to come back to the commission and get your input and see if there's a desire to change the code to allow that, because we do have a lot of inconsistencies. A lot of people are having problems with financing, both north and south of Villard, on the west side of town as well.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed rezoning from GC to R3.
There's been a motion by Mr. Krieg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been a second by Mr. Hanson. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Item 5 on our regular agenda is a rezone petition. To consider a rezone petition for the West Ridge Second Edition from agricultural to general commercial, medium density residential and high density residential. The site is generally described in the south half of Section 36, Township 140 North, Range 96 West, and a portion of the southwest quarter of Section 31, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 357 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Larry Nygaard from Roars Development. I'm here today to talk about the West Ridge Second Edition. I have with me Walt Smith from AE2S, the engineer of record on the project. He can help us answer some questions. What you have before you today is an extension of our West Ridge First Edition, which we started last year, which was primarily commercial in nature. As we move to the west with development, we transition into some multifamily and single-family housing. You've been given a preliminary plat of our first attempt at this, and we worked with planning staff closely to come up with what you see today. We've reviewed it. Things look good to us. We've reviewed the conditions offered by the city staff. We do have some questions and issues with a couple of the conditions, and I'd be happy to talk about those at the right time, but I'd like to start out by making myself available for any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Nygaard at this time?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Nygaard, the request, as I see it, is for commercial in R2, correct?
Pardon me?
The request is for general commercial in R2?
Yes.
And R3, that's right.
And R3, yeah.
Yeah. I know that sometimes R2 zoning is done, but there still might be a plan for single-family home construction.
Yes.
Is that in your plan?
It's primarily single-family. Some of the product that we hope to introduce in this subdivision would be maybe more dense than an R1. So not knowing exactly where the boundaries are at this point, we've chosen to go all R2, but I would say the vast majority of the lots are R1 in use. They're all meant to be owned by homeowners, with the exception of R3. Those will be leased, but primarily the intent here is to address the single-family market.
I continue to hear comments in Dickinson that we're really short of R1 lots.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Is that what you're
Yeah,
finding?
and I think you can be even more specific than that. There are certain types of R1 lots that just aren't available. We're hoping to address that need in some of what you see today.
Okay.
And primarily, it gets back to an affordability issue, you know, and you have to think about total land costs as part of your housing cost, and we're hoping to deal with some of that here.
Thank you. I've got a few more questions when we get to the plat
Okay, Mr.
stage, but
Jackson.
that's all I have on the zoning.
On these, do you plan on selling these lots off? You said the R3 will be leased?
In the R3s will be apartments, typical
Okay.
apartment style for lease.
But the R2, and which may become R1, are you going to sell the lots, or are you going to develop the property, then sell the homes?
No, we'll sell those to individual local builders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any comments or questions at this time for Mr. Nygaard?
Would you like me to get into the conditions then and
Sure,
offer
yes,
my?
might as well continue on.
Okay.
I don't hear anybody wanting to comment, so.
All right. We looked through the conditions, and there's a number of them, 19 in total, and a lot of that is due to the fact that we're breaking new ground and moving to the edge of the city, and the big questions concern how do we provide the city services to this area. And we're working on that. In fact, as you know, there's a water modeling study that's just been completed. That's going to play a big role in how this area gets serviced and what we have to do to accommodate that. So I'm assuming we're going to get through that issue, and I think we'll get through the sanitary sewer issues as well. Today I want to focus on number 6 and number 17, which relate to is it 15th Street North, and talk a little bit about what we've been planning on and what we've been thinking with regard to 15th Street. First of all, the request that the right-of-way be extended from, I think what we provided is 33 foot in our plat to 75. We're agreeable to that, so that would result in a slight change in the plat that you see today. But with regard to item 6, the construction of 15th gets to be somewhat problematic the way it's written. We have some development going on immediately to the north of us at the far east end of Westridge First Edition. And we've been working with the developers of the Les Frenzel property to develop a portion of 15th Street to the east. But we don't have any method of either obtaining the right-of-way necessary or developing or improving 15th Street all the way to 50th at this point. That property extends through 2 different farmsteads, one owned by Russ Hoff, who sold us the property, the other owned by Les Frenzel, where he continues to live. And at this point, neither one of those people, as I know it, are ready and willing to develop that area. So we really don't have a vehicle to obtain the right-of-way and improve 15th like the conditions said. So we've got a bit of a problem there. We're going to have to work through just on what would be acceptable for the continued development of our piece, knowing that we probably can't build a road through 15th at this time. So this is just one of the issues I think we need to work out with city staff on what's acceptable there.
Mr. Chairman, I could comment on it. Larry, the reason for the condition is the same that we held up on your apartments. You have to have 2 access points to it,
right,
and that would include your plat there. You know, Westridge Drive to the west, extending that's not going to be problematic, but we can't issue any building permits further to the west without that secondary access.
Right. And I understand that.
and it's a fire issue. It's strictly uniform fire code. So without that road or another access point being paved and a legitimate one for emergency access, we couldn't issue any building permits.
I understand that, and I'm going to offer a suggestion that I think is acceptable, at least from our standpoint, and that is because we're dedicating a full 75-foot of right-of-way, we have enough room within that 75 feet to build a hard surface road that can get us from 50th to the urban section of 15th that we intend to co-develop with the Meyer Group. And I think within that same right-of-way, we can extend the water line to accommodate the looping that we need to occur. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to develop an urban section that would be like a city street because I don't have the full right-of-way at this point. But I do think we can get an access road that's paved along the right-of-way that we give up and not have to worry about right-of-way to the north of us that's not yet obtained.
With respect to that, Mr. Chairman, I could just say that, that issue could be ferreted out as part of the development agreement.
Okay.
I'm just putting you on notice that you be aware that
Yeah.
you have to have 2 access points. Obviously, the fire department and the city engineer will be involved with respect to that condition. So,
Yeah.
just as long as you're aware of that, just as much as you are aware with the apartments that you're building, you could only go up to 100 until that additional access point was built. So that's the same condition for this one here. And those could be part of our discussions for the development.
Yeah, I think that's the proper place to do that, and we're happy to do that and understand it's part of what we need to do to go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Nygaard. I too, I think that's a issue for, you as a developer and the planner, engineering and who's going to pay for it, and fire and safety, that sounds to me like you're going in the right direction with that.
Well, there's solutions to all these issues. We just have to work hard at getting them resolved.
Any comments on that? Thank you, Mr. Nygaard. And you want to continue on or not? Do you have any other comments? Any other conditions you'd like to?
No, the other conditions I felt were acceptable and easily overcome. So I don't have anything else to discuss unless there are questions about the plat.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, again,
Yes, Mr.
I've got a few things I want to bring up when we talk about the plat, but we're just doing the rezoning right now, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I got into some of the conditions
No,
that
no,
were in
that-
item 6.
No, that,
I overlooked
we'd
that.
rather hear about it than, not.
Okay.
More information
you.
we have, the better. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward.
Good morning. I'm Leanne Karski, and this is my husband, Dean Karski. We own land north of this proposed rezone, and also we hold lease on part of this land. We are not against the rezoning. We do have some conditions that we would like to be added to your, if you make a motion, is that you are moving into agriculture production area and we farm land around this. What we are concerned about is that future purchasers of this land are known that there can be agricultural noise, chemical drift, odor, because we do pump our lagoons, and we are permitted with the state to dispose of our lagoon waste on our land. Dust, and that there's animals adjacent to the land that's going to be around this. We are just asking that there's going to be a disclosure made for future owners of this so that we're trying to protect ourselves for farmers. And then also, if this is rezoned, since we do still hold lease, are we still able to finish our lease and keep farming it?
And like our lagoon that we empty, it's not a problem with the odor until, like, we always pump it in April. And when you agitate 3 million gallons of animal waste, and then it gets applied over the top of the surface. There's an airway that what they do is they pump it from our lagoon out to the field, and they drag this drag hose, and it's applied on the surface. Well, then we have to buy rights with the state. We do have to work it in, but you have to give us time for that. You know, you can't work mud into the ground. So there's always going to be an odor for about a week until that's worked back in. And it's a very strong odor. And I mean, where we empty that, that's going to be right next to their apartments and houses that they're planning on putting in. So there's definitely going to be some issues. Because if anybody knows, you know, we've been out there for a long time. When we pump our lagoon, I've heard comments from a lot of people, boy, we smelled your lagoon all over here in town. Well, it's, you know, now you're moving closer to us, and it's going to get a lot worse. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to smell that.
Mr. Karski, you need to go on vacation.
I know.
And go to Iowa and Illinois in the summertime.
It's worse there, huh?
Take a drive, yes.
I have left the farm in 18 years, so I ain't about to leave now. Somebody's got to milk the cows, right?
No, that's right. That's right. We
Now-
appreciate.
Now I know why you're the chairman.
We appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Anything? Would you like to add anything else?
Just mainly that we'd like something in the motion, so that there is going to be a disclosure for future
Buyers
of the land.
We'll take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Corton.
I could address that. It's part of our comp plan and what I've done in the past in areas that I've been at. You put a note on the plat for all the prospective buyers, and this would be consistent to what we have in the comp plan. The note in essence says that, you know, the neighboring property owners, your next agricultural uses, and harvesting, spraying, animal grazing, and other common agricultural practices of adjacent and nearby agricultural operations will be in use. They're put on notice, and, you know, the applicant is the one moving next to an agricultural use. Therefore, the impact should be on the applicant and not on the adjoining neighbors.
Right.
And that would be true also for the Meyer piece that's coming up as well. We'll place that on the plot as well.
Is there anyone else in the public who'd like to make comment? Anyone in the commission wish to make comment at this time? I'll just say that Mr. and Mrs. Karski, you've gone up and above what your consideration, you know, is very forthcoming, and that your concerns should be addressed, and you should be able to keep living your lifestyle and doing your business, and that you're more than considerate by making your comments. Anyone else have any comments? Being none, I would close the public portion of this hearing and ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the rezoning as requested from agricultural to general commercial, R2 and R3. Do we actually have conditions on the rezoning? We have the two, I guess, huh? Okay, with the two conditions shown.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. There's been a motion. Is there a second? A second. Been a second by Mr. Grimm. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Item 6 on our regular agenda is a preliminary plat. To consider a preliminary plat for the Westridge Second Edition. The site is generally described in the south half of Section 36, Township 140 North, Range 97 West, and a portion of southwest quarter of Section 31, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. The site is approximately 357 acres. At this time, I'd ask the party presenting. Please come forward.
You know, everything I said before, I should have just saved for this one, so I misspoke, like I said. I'm sorry about that. So I don't have anything else to add.
Mr. Tews, question.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nygaard, how much of this is annexed in already?
Well, at this point, none of it would be, right? Just through West Ridge First Edition? Yeah.
Mr. Tews, to answer your question, what we've done in the past, or what our policy is currently, is that we'll wait until final plat and annex it so that we don't incur the additional liability.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
Just want to confirm, Mr. Nygaard, I think I heard you say that the 15th Street west of 50th will be changed to a 75-foot right-of-way?
Yeah, I believe that was one of the conditions, number 17, yeah.
Okay. The south end of 50th itself, 50th Avenue, the way it dead ends against the interstate, are there some thoughts about that? Are there some possibilities there? Or?
Well, I guess the thought from the planning staff is that that it would be wise to allow for an on-ramp, an off-ramp there.
Yeah.
Whether or not that happens, I don't know. You know, there's significant improvements going just about 2 miles west of that on exit 56, I believe. So I don't know how we're going to do that. I think we're going to have to just maybe plat a lot that would contain the area necessary for an on and off ramp, and then if it doesn't get used, we'd have a lot available at some point in the future.
Yeah, and I think it's good that we're thinking about that possibility, and even if not an on and off ramp, maybe just an overhead.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I think it's good that we're at least talking about that. I noticed there's a lot of utility easements missing. I assume that those will show up by the time we get to final plat. You know, a couple of the things here I'll point out, and I don't think they're things we have to decide today, but I bring it up so you guys can maybe think about it, and engineering staff can think about it a little bit, but I think you're showing 6 retention ponds, and maybe that's what we need. But it seems to me if there was a way to reduce those to 1 or 2 or something, if that's technically feasible, and maybe it's not. I know our staff will have to look at that with you, but it just seems to me that if we can minimize the number of retention ponds, be better for everybody. Did you look at the culverts through 94, through I-94?
Yes. No, Walt studied those.
Yeah, we're permitting filling in the 100-year floodway that is, or flood area that is within phase 1 of the second edition here. And we're permitting it with FEMA, and as part of that, we've got to model both the floodplains and prove that they go under the highway and all that. So yeah,
Okay.
it's in the process right now.
Okay. You know, the biggest thing we're going to have to do here, and I know Mr. Nygaard knows this, but with this development as well as the next one that we're going to look at on our agenda is the off-site contributions. I think we all know that we've got water reservoirs to build, we've got trunk lines, sewer interceptors, and whatnot to build. And through the process of the development agreement, we're going to have to sit down with you guys and decide what kind of financial arrangement we're going to make as we move forward. And I think you're aware of that.
Yeah.
I just think we need to understand that, and the biggest reason I bring it up is that our normal process now would be 60 days from now to look at the final plat. And with some of the engineering things that are in process, and simply that negotiation, if you will, I really question whether or not our staff can get this done in 60 days. You know, we could delay approval of this preliminary plat. I don't know that we need to do that. I think we can approve it today with the understanding that it may take more than the 60 days to get all this done.
Yeah.
So I just think we've all got to recognize that and allow the staff time to do its job and make sure that you guys are aware of that.
Yeah, I think I see this as a starting point for kind of the rest of what has to take place, but we don't get to even talk about that unless we have a premise to start with. Well,
You
now
bet.
we sort of have a baseline. We need to look at, you know, how we get water in the area and what's an effective way to deal with the pressures out there. And we just couldn't even talk about that until we get to this point.
Sure.
So.
And I think if there were significant enough layout changes to the preliminary plat, then I'd say, let's delay it. But I don't see that here. So I think we can approve it. You know, that's the main thing I wanted to talk about, with the exception of one other thing. A few months ago, we were told by our consultant with the comprehensive plan and by our staff that we had enough residential ground in Dickinson to handle 50,000 people. I think you guys probably remember that a few months ago. That should make us ask the question, why are we doing this morning? You know, why are we adding more if we've already got enough for 50,000 people? Now, of course, it's not as simple as that. A lot of that ground isn't getting developed, unfortunately. You know, there's a lot of good reasons to look at this ground being developed, but I think it's, as a community, still a question that we have to be looking at continually, just continually. So I'd like to suggest, or I'd like to ask, that before we look at the final plat, that we ask the staff to update those numbers that we looked at a few months ago. What do we really have in town for lots that are at various stages of development? And then I'd like to ask you guys to participate in that discussion with us. You've got to be looking at this from a marketing standpoint all the time. You know, I don't think I have to tell you the questions, the decisions that as a community we have to make. But I just want to I'm going to vote for the preliminary plat approval today. But I think before we see the preliminary plat, I'd like us just to engage in that discussion. Have the staff do that part of it, and then have you guys and maybe other developers in town be part of that discussion. So we continually look at that as we're going forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tooze.
I guess I disagree with Mr. I disagree in the fact that if we're going to approve the prelim and move forward and have them go about and do all that and then get to the final and deny it, we should be looking at that before, Mr. Jackson, before we approve the prelim, so we don't misrepresent to him that we're going to approve it.
Yeah.
When it comes to the R3, we've talked about limiting that. I mean, there's things that if we approve the prelim, aren't we telling him that we can go ahead? So it'd be better to continue it rather than approve it.
Well, you can do that if you want. I don't think we need to do that. I'm not telling you that I'm going to vote against the final plat. I'd be voting against this plat if I didn't think we should do it. But I do want to use the process to force the discussion for us as a community. And I'd like to, you know, I'd like to use this approval. We're stretching ourselves another 3/4 mile west with this development. We're getting a long ways out there. And I've accepted the fact that we should do it. I'm not sure I would be in favor of going any further west. But we just have to keep analyzing this stuff and discussing it as we move forward.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Kolash.
If you read your, in your packet, there was some email correspondence between Mr. Corton and Mr. Kramer. On behalf of the Park Board, you know, just so everybody's aware that they have not come to the Park Board for Westridge 1 or 2. So, you know, we've got a significant amount of acreage here that could certainly change things. I know there's been a phone call. I think Mr. Croton had sent them an email telling them they needed to get this straightened out, and I believe somebody called James on it.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, they have not been in front of the board, so we have not addressed this whatsoever. I would imagine you're probably going to be on the next
Yeah.
agenda.
Mhm.
But
That's right.
just so you're all aware, there's been nothing decided, and Westridge 1, of course, is on its way, and they haven't been there in front of us for that either.
I can maybe just address that a little bit. And we did visit with Westridge 1, with the Park District about the possibility of locating a regional park in this area. And we continue to hold out that hope. And we've got one located in a master plan. But part of that was subject to getting through this tonight, or this morning. But we still are holding out hope for a large regional park to be developed in the area that takes advantage of the location and whatnot. We've been visiting with potential uses and users for that area. So I can tell you that now that we've gotten past this hurdle, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about what we can do there, and we're hoping to do something real exciting. And if it doesn't work out, that's not the right place, we'll just have to do the payment in lieu of. But I'm here to say that we are going to make ourselves available and land available for a large park, should that be desired.
I think that would be wise to get those discussions on board, because there's a legal requirement that the Park District, as a political subdivision, has a right to pick and choose what they desire in these developments to satisfy their needs or their desires.
And
Mr. Kovash.
just a comment, you know, in talking to James, I mean, he sounded quite positive that we will be able to figure something out, but the fact of the matter is, it hasn't been done. And it could change the plat considerably if it's land that we choose to take. So it's kind of premature to say what it's going to be. I don't know, but nevertheless, it has to get squared away. And whether we do it now or it'll have to be done before the final, and if it's not, then I don't know how the final would go through.
Correct. Yep. Someone should initiate those discussions, whether it is the Park District or
We'll take
your
care
developer.
of that. Yeah.
But I would encourage also, I mean, we know technically where the responsibility lies, but in reality, for the best wishes of the city, it takes two to tango, and we have to, maybe Mr. Kovash could carry the message to Mr. Kramer to maybe initiate the talks too. I mean, we'd like to see things move forward positively. I did have a question, if you don't mind me interrupting. On this project, you have phases, how many different phases on this project? And what are your desires to develop first at this time without any further discussions on what engineering and ponds and everything else? What would your initial desire be to be phase 1, 2, 3, whatever?
Let's see what's the best way to do this. If everything could be worked out engineering-wise, that would be what we do in 2013. And then that would be what we do in 2014. And then I do have a master plan for the entire area. You know, this may not be the time to talk about that, but you know, then we have 15 and 16 plans as well. So.
Well, I think it's appropriate right now to mention it because Mr. Jackson brought up valid points about what the city has on the books for commercial and residential. And the fact of the matter is that you as a developer have done very nicely on your projects that you said you were going to do. And further on down the road, as he mentioned, that he'd like to see some discussions prior to a final that that this project in whatever phases is probably going to get done if recommended, then there's other developers that are gonna get left behind. And those discussions of what we have on the books, but who's doing what,
Yeah.
is gonna play a part in this. So I'm keenly interested in what you plan to do and when you plan to do it, and you followed through on your other projects.
Well, what I showed you as phase one is completely sold out.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't have any shortage of buyers or interest in the property that I'm developing, so I'm completely confident in that. So, and they're picking in phase two right now, so, yeah, there's always gonna be lots of inventory, but some people just don't get things done. That's the way it works.
Thank you. Thank you for your candid comments. Mr. Tews.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I agree with some of the comments that you made. And, you know, Roars just came in and they've done some nice developments. And I agree with your development here, Larry. I agree with your whole concept and everything. It looks nice. I think that we need a plan, you know, that has the water, sewer, streets, and everything, such as other developers had to propose. And with this much acreage, I guess, why wouldn't we hold Mr. Nygaard to the standards that we've held the other developers to before we approve a prelim? It's my only question. And with 19 items and the park issue, why would we move forward with the prelim until some of that's taken care of?
Any other comments on that? Mr. Krieg.
Mr. Chairman, you know, I agree. I mean, last month we approved a proposal here contingent upon, and you know, we've been trying to set a precedence to get the parks, and especially the parks and all that stuff cleared up. You know, he's talking building in 2013, and we don't even know about the parks yet. It just seems a little premature. I mean, we're a couple months from construction, and the parks haven't been set. If we're going to hold to our guns and try and get this format figured out, where, you know, they need to have approval from the parks, and we need to start setting some precedents here as a board of get that squared away before you come to us, because we could be sitting here right now looking at this, and if the parks go in a place where they're not shown, that's going to change this whole plat, and then that might change the water, sewer, retention ponds, everything. So, you know, I'm a little bit concerned we're heading the wrong direction of what we were trying to do as a board, of trying to get things more done in an orderly fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Krieg.
And another comment to further on Mr. Creed's comments, if we continue it, it'll actually save Mr. Nygaard time. Because then he won't have to advertise and do all that again. Am I correct, Ed?
If you continue it, we have traditionally advertised, but we wouldn't charge the applicant to do that. You know, we just do that as a courtesy.
And you
to the
wouldn't have to
general
wait
public.
that other 60-day period. You could come back next month with these changes. And
Well, absolutely, absolutely.
Mr. Nygaard, do you have any comments on what you just heard? I'd like to hear if you have any thoughts.
Well,
we would like to appreciate.
I think Mr. Jackson maybe summed it up best earlier when the likelihood that in the next 30 or 60 days we're going to get all the details worked out with regard to some of the utility issues is remote, okay, because there's some complicated issues there, and so we need to spend some time discussing that. So I think that's going to naturally take some more time than usual. And it's my thought that some of these other issues can get worked out during that time. You know, that the location of the park area that we'd like to share isn't contained within the boundaries of this plat. So I think that would mean a discussion or an agreement with them about where it might be located or how it might be paid for, that type of thing. Some of those things I'd like to work on in the upcoming 30 to 60 days or 90 days, as Mr. Jackson recommended, because there are some big issues that we need to deal with. Some of the questions, in defense of city staff and also ourselves, some of the issues regarding water, for example. I mean, that water modeling study, I don't even know if that's official yet. I think it was just released in parts as early as last week. And some of that affects really how we do this and how it lays out. So we've been sort of waiting for third parties to give us information that provide insight to what we're doing here. And all of that's coming together now, I think will allow us to, you know, sort of put a button on this and get it all wrapped up. So I'd like to not see it continued, but I'm confident that when we come to final, all those details will be worked out. So I'd like to ask that if we could.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate your response.
Mr. Chairman, so if we don't continue it, you're fine with being out 60 more days to bring your final back, Larry?
Yeah, I think we're going to need that much time anyway, Mr. Tooze, just to get some of the details worked out.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
You know, I think Mr. Tooze, Mr. Krieg raised a good point. And I guess I can go either way on it. You know, I want to make the point that I'm ultimately in favor of the plat. But I think it's only fair that everybody know that I really have concerns about going farther west. And you know, maybe I won't have at some point, but I really do right now. And when I hear that the park might be proposed for further west, that concerns me. So, you know, with that in mind, maybe it would be best if we continued it.
Any other comments on that? Any other thoughts on that? I would say either way, I would be in favor of either. It wouldn't matter. But what I really would like to see is that even if it took a special meeting, that the developer you would sit down with the Park District and and come to a conclusion that that would satisfy their end of it and yours, that hurdle could be met, because we have stated emphatically that the finals can't go forward without an agreement with the Park District to their satisfaction on other projects. And we're coming to a point where I think we're going to have to make a decision, and the Park District is going to have to give us the message that no, we haven't come to an agreement on this development or other development, and they don't want us to go forward. So I think that talk has to take place. That's my biggest concern. As far as engineering and the ponds and all, that's the engineers in the city will take care of that part of it. I mean, that's an engineering feat that you guys can work out anything. You can pump stuff uphill if you have to. But I would like to see that. I really would like to see the Park District and the developer get together. I think that's important.
You know, I'm hearing Mr. Nygaard, I think, acknowledge that he probably won't be back here in 60 days with a final plat.
It doesn't sound like it.
Right? Well, it sounds like it really wasn't your expectation.
This really was a launch pad, like I said, to finish the rest of
So
discussion.
I'm okay either way. I'm okay approving this preliminary plat today, recognizing that there probably is going to be 90 days or maybe more. I don't know. Take care of the park thing, but I defer to you guys.
And I think the consensus here is that, I'm waiting to see it, but I believe that there's a consensus that before going forward with a final, that the conditions have to be met. Park District has to be satisfied. The roads have to be worked out with the access, and the item 6 and 17 that you were concerned about, are 17, and the engineering on the ponds and whether or not that's acceptable. All that is finite stuff with engineering can be satisfied, but there is, you know, the holding thing of the Park District satisfaction. And I think you fully understand that. I think everyone else has a consensus here that we do have that thing that we would like to see taken care of. So if this is a, you know, either a continuance or a approval of the preliminary plat with the knowledge that these other conditions will be looked at and taken care of, you wouldn't come back here without
Nope.
taking care of them. So and I firmly believe that. So,
No, the thing about, the difference is a continuance, I don't get to keep working on the project from an engineering standpoint. An approval of preliminary gives me the green light to start doing the engineering.
Sure.
Under the assumption we get those details worked out.
Sure.
So that's the difference to me.
yeah. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Nygaard?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we want to move forward with that one. Anyone in the public at this time have comment on this preliminary plat request? Any other commissioners have a comment at this point in time?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson.
I'd like to get Mr. Curtan's take on the difference between continuing and approving and then taking care of these things.
Commissioner Jackson, the difference between the continuance would be they have no entitlement. And as Mr. Nygaard has stated, that he's not guaranteed, and you know, it's up to him if he would decide to move forward with engineering. He has no entitlement. It'd be the same as he is today. It would give staff an additional 30 days to work with our consultants and a revised staff report, give you more detail that we have not been able to provide at this point. Recommending approval of it would grant him the entitlement with the conditions. They are very broad in nature, purposely so that staff has the ability to negotiate and work through them. Also, we have the development agreement, which is broad in its nature, to address anything that was kind of outstanding or lacking that we may not have attributed to the conditions. I would not bring this forward until all that is met. 60 days is, I don't see that as a possibility. I really don't. Looking at our staff time, the projects we're starting with development season. Over the last week, we've seen a significant increase in calls and projects that are moving forward that we have to pay attention to in addition to everything else. 60 days is, I don't see it as an adequate turnaround in order to accomplish all those tasks and to have negotiations with the applicant. 90 days or longer is more realistic in my opinion. That being said, that's, you know, a lot of these conditions are placed on other departments, and I can't speak for them directly, but that would be my general feel. I think that for you as a commission, if I had to look in my crystal ball, 90 days would be the earliest that you would see this come this way. That would be the same also for the Meyer one as well, the subsequent one that's adjoining this. I see 90 days as the minimum coming back for final plat approval.
So, Mr. Corton, you don't see a problem with recommending a preliminary plat because you wouldn't even put this on our agenda for 90 days, right?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying is that if I had to project either 60 or 90, I would definitely weigh heavily towards 90. I don't think 60 is going to be a conceivable turnaround because when you look at packet materials, advertising, and the rest, it's not as if, oh, okay, we get it done on the 60th day I come in front of you. No, this has to be wrapped up in a bow 45 days prior to that because we have to advertise actually even earlier than that. So I don't see that a 60-day turnaround is conceivable for this project, nor the subsequent one as well. So I think that if you're looking at 90 days to give staff the time, that would probably be a reasonable time period. But but a lot of it is going to be negotiations. You've read the conditions. We may have disagreements, and I'm sure we will, with respect to cost shares. That's going to be a significant discussion item between the developer and city staff. So we could come in and say that we feel that this is it and move that forward and not have an agreement, and that could be conceivable where we come to you and say that as city we're recommending this and the developer does not, and it's ultimately left up to you to decide. But I would hope that we would have all that ironed out. But there's a lot of issues with this one. to address. We have water tanks, future and also existing, off-site improvements, sewer, water, road issues. That's a lot of money that we're talking about. That's a lot of discussions that we do have to have within our limited staff that we have now. We're looking at consultants to help us out, but that takes time as well. So I don't see 60 days as a feasible turnaround. 90 is more realistic.
Thank you. Any other comments? This time I'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson?
Before we have the motion, if I could.
Yes.
I think the length of time that Mr. Croton's talking about is a given. If he needs 90, if he needs 120 days, I think he needs to take the time that he and the rest of our staff need to do proper review. I think the only question here is, are we okay not having the park issue resolved, approving the preliminary plat, and then going into whatever number of days it takes to solve the park issue as well as the rest of it?
My opinion is yes. I'd like to hear the other opinions. I think we're okay, because I think we have said earlier that we can approve this preliminary plat, and there's the conditions on there, because I think we're going to be asked the question later on today, okay, was that condition met, and are we going to say yes or no at that point in time? So I think if we do what we've said we're going to do, and the conditions are placed on it, I'm comfortable with it. Anyone have comments on that? Mr. Corton, did you want to make a comment first?
Well, yes, on the final plat on the parks, I mean, if it's ultimately determined from the Parks District that they want a park on Phase 1 or Phase 2, then, that's left up to, ultimately it will come back to you to make that call, and a revision would be necessary. The key is that on the final plat, you don't have significant changes, but if you're reducing it for a greater good, like I'm saying for a park, then going from preliminary to final and then putting a park on there, they just lose lots and maybe reconfigure some of the roads. So I don't see that has to come back through the entire preliminary plat stage. We can address that and they just show a park dedication as part of their final plat approval. So if that's a concern that would change the configurations of the roads and the lots, because they have to dedicate a portion of the property for a park, that issue is a reduction on what their overall project would be. That can be taken care of at final plat. I don't see that it has to come back at preliminary for that. I don't know if that eases any of your conversations, but that issue will definitely need to be resolved prior to this being submitted. I'll guarantee you that those comments will be taken care of and addressed before we move forward to final plat. If that gives you any reassurance.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Pig?
Prior to your comments before, it almost sounds like we're okay then with every developer not going to the park board before they come to us. And, just having said that, no, I'm not okay with that. So that's where I stood last month, that's where I stand this month. I think we need to set the precedence to get this straight. I mean, yes, we can put contingencies on there, but then they can meet any time they want, as far as I'm concerned. So I'd like to see them completed before they come to us.
Mr. Kovac?
Well, and that's what I was going to mention. I mean, it's frustrating on our part, because this is supposed to be done before the preliminary comes here. But having said that, we did it with Myers, I believe, last month. And so it's hard to, at some point in time, we do have to set a precedence. Either we're going to let it happen or we're not going to let it happen. I'm confident it can get done, and I'm not opposed to this whatsoever, at all. But the fact of the matter is, that's the way it's supposed to be done, and it hasn't been.
Thank you, Mr. Kovac. Any other comments on that? Mr. Castle, please come forward. We're a little pre-motion discussion here.
Thank you, Chairman Abrahamson, Commission. You were talking earlier about some of the significant differences between a continuance and final plating. There is one thing that I'd like to bring to your attention, and maybe even Community Director Corton can extrapolate further. But if you approve preliminary plat, we have allowed developers in the past to move forward with groundwork based on that preliminary plat at their own risk. But it does allow them to start moving dirt and start preparing foundations and such. So that's a significant difference between a continuance and a preliminary plat. And I wanted you to be aware of that, so because it does have an impact on the practice that we have had in the past. And maybe, again, Ed can extrapolate that. But I just wanted you to be aware of that, that practice.
Thank you, Mr. Castle. Thank you very much for that.
You know, I could add to that if you like, Mr. Chairman. I mean,
Yes.
I think that Mr. Kessel's comments are, you know, are accurate. We have allowed, you know, as part of a grading plan, after you get preliminary approval, we have allowed that to move forward. But, you know, ultimately it's going to be your decision to make as a commission, and I respect that. If you want to hold off on it and continue it a month, that is ultimately your call.
Thank you. Anyone else like to make a comment before we have a motion? This time then I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh. Mr. Krieg?
I would make a motion that we continue this on.
I'll second it.
And a second. Any discussion?
I would like to have some discussion.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You know, Mr. Kessel's comments are accurate. I think we do want to see the subdivision move forward. It is still only March. This park thing probably can be resolved by the time of our next meeting. I'd even be open to a special meeting if it can happen that fast. I'm fine with that. But I think we do need to make the point. We've had the problem on so many plats, and I think we need to make the point. So let's get this done, get it done right, then we'll move forward.
Thank you. I think, too, I think the point has to be made, and I mentioned, I think we're having something come down the road here that we're going to have to deny if we go stand on our word. And I, too, I would like to see some way that, and I don't know the parks, Park and Rec's manpower and their timing and all the things they have to do, how they can be more involved and in getting some of these issues resolved to their satisfaction. But I also appreciate the fact that these parks or these non-parks or the money that's taken, they're going to affect this city for 100 years down the road. You decide where a park is in a proper fashion, that's going to be used by people from, you know, our great-grandchildren down the road. And so that is a significant impact on the city in deciding what type of recreational facilities or parks, open spaces that we need to have and where they have to be. It's not just a whim. That's my opinion. I think that it has to be thought out, and the park district has to be given the time to do it and do it properly. And hopefully they got the manpower to do it.
Mr.
What do you think,
Chairman?
Mr. Kovac?
Well, you know, I don't want the park district to look like we're the ones that are holding things up. But the fact of the matter is there was all kinds of time to come to the park district to discuss this before it came to this point, and it wasn't done. So, you know, it always seems like it comes back to the park district that we haven't decided, but it hasn't come in front of us. And, you know, this is a lot of acreage, whether it's land we take, whether it's cash, it's a big deal. So I agree. I think we need to do it. I don't want to hold it up. I really don't. But I think that's the way we have to go. If there has to be a special meeting, whether it be the park district, I don't think there's any problem with that whatsoever. That can be done. We just need to get this resolved.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's significant planning. I mean, that's a big plan. It takes a lot of forethought into placing parks and recreation areas where they're going to be used if you look around the city, there's places that have been here since, it's almost 100 years, and they've been used, and that's what you're doing. You're putting something in a place that's going to be there for a long time. And the thought process has got to be very, thorough, and the planning has to be very thorough where you're going to use that.
Well, and the other thing is it isn't always so easy. We've got the school district that in one area may potentially need to put a school. And so we have to look at some of that we don't really know if it'll ever happen. There's a lot of things that we have to take into consideration. I know it's our land, but we're trying to help the school district out if they need something. So, I mean, it sometimes isn't so easy as just to say cash or land.
Yeah.
We got to figure out what everybody's going to do with this. I mean, as a park district, we don't want 75 acres of land and do nothing with it. We want to have a plan too.
Any other discussion? Mr. Krieg?
Mr. Chairman, and, not just pointing this down to the park board, but, I got no problem with what they proposed or the developers, but, I think it's in everybody's mind that we look at the 3-month, 6-month, 9-month deal, and reality is it's probably double or triple that. So any developments that are taking place, you need to double or triple the time frame just because of, Parks and Rec, the city, the staff. I mean, it's a mad rush world out there right now, and I think the developers as well as the city and everyone else, we just need to be planning for that. That it's going to take more time than what we're saying. If we're going to prove it in 60 days, well, you better double that. So I think we need to get that message out there. We need more time.
Any further discussion? I too would. I did mention that I would be in favor of a special meeting if it need be to facilitate any of this between the planner, and the developer, and the planning and the parks. But any further discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried to continue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This time we'll take a 5-minute recess. This meeting will re-adjourn, and this time we're going to continue on with item 7, a rezone petition. To consider a rezone petition for Pinecrest from agricultural to planned unit development for commercial and residential uses. The site is generally described as government lots 1 and 2, east half of the northwest quarter of section 31, township 140 north, range 96 west, and a portion of the northeast quarter of section 31, township 140 north, range 96 west, and government lots 3 and 4, and the east half west quarter of section 30, township 140 north, range 96 west. The site is approximately 322 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commission members, city staff. My name is Clark Wickland, civil engineer with Alliant Engineering. With me today is Brian Bachman and Mr. Pat Hart, the applicants. I guess what I would like to do is just a brief overview of the project for anyone in attendance, and those viewing. You should have received a narrative that kind of outlined the application. Project area, roughly 360 acres, as stated, located west of 30th Avenue and north of the Roars subdivision. It's currently the Frenzo farm for the most part. Currently, site is undeveloped, agriculture, primarily row crops. There's also some oil production out in the area, which people are familiar with. Drainage from the site kind of goes southwesterly from northwest to southeast. The proposed plan, there's a mixed-use project, proposes for office industrial, commercial retail, light industrial, public space, apartments, manufactured homes, townhomes, single-family homes. manufactured homes. I'll try to work from north to south and rely on this exhibit here, and you're going to have to, I'll try to speak up so everyone can hear me. Current proposal is for manufactured homes up in this location here, townhomes in this location here, and manufactured homes are roughly 390 and 106 acres. The twin homes, the townhomes at this location are on about 16 acres, 127 units. This area to the south is all single-family homes on roughly 60 acres, about 206 single-family homes. Twin homes further to the south. Twin homes are on about 14 acres, 78 units. Apartments are currently proposed in the rear of a large retail potential super center. Retail, the apartments are roughly for the total 300, and our acreage is about 25 acres. As stated, there's a large retail here, potential power center. The area currently provides planning for that entire area. There is, however, an exception parcel of about 10 acres owned by the Decker family. The plan could be phased in consideration of their desire to remain in the vegetation, existing trees on all sides could be preserved. We've reviewed the city's comprehensive plan, which we understand was approved at the second reading just on the 18th. We believe the plan as proposed is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, or the 2035 plan. Number of project high points, which have been discussed at length with staff and other representatives of the community. The project is proposing for the construction of 15th Street at its southernmost border. There's currently discussions with the adjacent developer to the south to do that as a joint venture type project. Project is also proposing for the extension of off-site water main to resolve some of the water service issues. There's a water tower located approximately a half mile east, directly in line with 15th Street, and it would be intended that a 12-inch main be installed through that area to that water tower. We intend to work with the city on that matter and find out what its effects are to the water service area. Current comprehensive plan delineates the limits of service roughly through this area. It's our expectation that by way of that connection, the area can be expanded to include some larger portion. The exact amount of that is undecided. We realize the city's consultants are working on that matter, and we would expect to have some additional information within a month or so. The project, the current application also proposes for a potential water site. The water site was depicted down in proximity to some public land, which would potentially be set aside for the school district. That public land, public area, amounts to about 25 acres, and it's my understanding that the applicant has been in communication and working with community representatives regarding its location. But as indicated, there is currently proposed for a water tower to be down at this location, in proximity to the public area. We realize that the northern portion of the site is higher. As such, the ability to provide for better pressure is understood. We suspect we can work with the city in regards to that matter by way of situating something up there if necessary. We would also ask that the city potentially consider, as part of their master planning, areas adjacent that are yet higher in elevation. There's a higher area generally over here. There's a higher area to the north. And then there's a about a 100-acre drainage way that is off-site, kind of northwesterly. So everything going up in this location continues to get higher. Saying that, though, the applicant obviously has only control of what their application limits are, and some location could be worked out with city staff. As part of the application, a considerable stormwater management plan was submitted. We understand it's currently being reviewed by city staff or their consultants. The current stormwater management system is for a network of basins, drainage ways, and underground conduits. In general, the proposed discharge rates are roughly half of what the city's ordinance requires. So we've tried to realize or take advantage of some of the larger open areas, provide ponding, and reduce what impacts we'll have further downstream. As stated in the narrative and depicted in the submittal drawings, it's currently proposed, or there's currently proposed an initial phase. The initial phase of the project is delineated. I'll just quickly reference what those improvements considered currently are to be. The construction of 15th Street, potential extension of the off-site 12-inch water main, the commercial retail area or some portion. Potentially first phase of that would be to the south of the Decker parcel, the apartment area, the twin home area, and the single family home area. And those are areas on roadway D. Roadway D is an arterial roadway that extends between 15th and 21st. The manufactured homes area, trunk and lateral utilities as necessary, and mass grading of those phase 1 areas. The project is currently proposed as a PUD. As we look at the city zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan, most of the land uses, the manufactured homes, twin homes, townhomes, retail, office area, all comply with the city's ordinances for dimensional standards, setback, and such. It's primarily for the single family and twin home layout, the varying setbacks and lot widths that the PUD is necessary. We've reviewed the staff report. We have observed comments received from Mr. Doug Decker, and I believe he's requesting the potential to preserve existing trees, access 30th Avenue, and compatibility with the commercial development. As stated, that area has been master planned in consideration of his land. Grades in that area are such that if he elected not to participate at this time, that the development could be phased and the vegetation on all sides of his lot preserved. It should also be noted that the vegetation he makes reference to exists from north to south along the whole rear side of the potential commercial retail area. The current application is proposing to preserve all of that existing tree line to buffer the residential uses to the west from the retail uses to the east. We've read the conditions, the recommendations from staff in regards to conditions. The applicant is accepting of those conditions and is here to answer any questions, as am I. Thanks.
This time, does anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Bradley on this rezone? Mr. Jackson?
I'd like to ask one right now, and Mr. Wickland, maybe you said, first of all, the content that's there really lets us give a good look at this preliminary plat. maybe you said it and I missed it, but I don't think that there are plans to submit a final plat on all of what you're showing us in the preliminary plat. Is that true?
That is correct.
Can you tell us, did you tell us already and I missed it?
Yeah, the area that would receive final plat application would coincide with the area of the Phase 1 limits as depicted in the submittal. And that would essentially be a portion of the retail area that would be able to go forward in consideration of Mr. Decker's property, potentially some portion to the south, the apartment area, this north to south, internal roadway, so single-family homes and twin homes. The townhomes at this location, and the manufactured homes to the north, in addition to the potential off-site water main extension and the construction of 15th Street.
So most of what we're seeing in what would be the northwest quarter of Section 31 will not be submitted as a final plat.
Are you talking about this area here, Gene?
I saw your submittal. I know the answer to this. I want to get it on the record, though, that most of what's in the northwest quarter of Section 31 will not be coming in as a final plat right now.
Correct.
Okay. You know, I have a number of other things to bring up, but maybe we should ask the question about parks. Get that out of the way.
We can, I think that's a good point. Mr. Colvine,
We have, we actually kind of lumped three developments together on this. Pinecrest, Sundance Village, and Sundance Coves. We kind of looked at them as a whole. So we have come up with an agreement with them. I believe it's roughly 25, 26 acres in Pinecrest, and I believe it's about 8 acres in Sundance Village. And then we worked out some other things. So we are, this is done.
aren't you kind of ahead of things?
No, but he has, you know, he has met with us a couple different times, and this is the way it's supposed to go.
Sure. We're only on a rezone petition right now. But that's good. Thank you. Any other comments or questions at this time? Mr. Craig?
Mr. Chairman, similar to along, I guess, the parks, you know, it's somewhat confusing because, and I'll refer to the Decker property. I see where they excluded it out on one portion, but yet they show their preliminary plan here of building through it. So I guess I'm curious to hear from where this is all taking place here. Is it or isn't it, or where things are going in that direction? So,
are there some maybe different plans for that, or based on someone's desires or not?
Currently, what you've seen as part of the application is what the master plan is potentially for that area. My understanding of the city's requirements is that if you're developing adjacent to a parcel that may not be included, you should give consideration to how it would be incorporated into the submittal. Also, in order to determine impacts to the city, as part of our study for stormwater, for traffic, that current use or the development of that sort through that area, which would be considered to be the most intense, has also been analyzed. So I think it's appropriate to do it at this time, though realizing it's not part of the application. If Mr. Decker would not participate, there would need to be modification on either side of it. Those modifications could be done in a manner that then would, you know, if in the future he chose to do something, it could be incorporated.
So on your official application for a rezone, it's your property that you're requesting. Mr. Decker is not involved in this rezone request.
He is not included as part of the application.
Right.
And as part of the plat, Jerry, to answer your question, is we show those as an outlot because basically it's going to be a tenant-driven look to those areas. So what we depicted was, kind of the utopia of if we could make everything work, that's the way it would work. But we have individual big box users and so on that are going to not want to be part of one big long building. So in essence, the end won't look like that. But that'll come back as a piecemeal thing as that area gets redone.
Mr. Jack?
One more question. With respect to the final plat portion of this, will it be one final plat? So the final plat will be 2/4 plus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Tews?
Mr. Chairman, because of the Twos subdivision, I'm going to abstain from any conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Tews. Any other comments or questions at this time? At this time, I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward.
Good morning, Commission, City staff. My name is Doug Decker. I reside at 1603 30th Avenue West, and this is just the rezone, is that correct?
Right. At this point in time, we're on.
So I'm zoned right now residential ag, and that's staying.
Right. This application for this rezone petition is strictly on the other property owners. For you to do this, you would have to either come in yourself and request a rezone, or someone else would have to request on behalf of the city or the county to have your property rezoned.
Okay.
And then you would have your say in that. But right at this point in time, no, your property is not part of this official request of rezone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Decker. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to make comment? Please feel free to come forward.
Commissioner, city staff, I'm Laura Tews. Unfortunately, my husband Todd was not able to attend. We are another 10-acre property located within this development. Just a couple concerns that we have. We were told at the City Commission meeting during the annexation process that at some point during the planning and zoning, we could have some impact into what was going to be developed. And we would just like to know what that is. One of our biggest concerns will be boundaries within our property, and it has been said at previous meetings that you guys were concerned about R3 saturation, and there is R3 in this development, and we know that Roars already has 2 buildings started to the south, so we're just wondering where you are with that. And then the only other comment that we would like to make is it has also been said that new developments should conform to what is already there. So is there any way that we can get larger lots around our property as well as Mr. Decker's? And I think that would be all I would have.
Thank you, Mrs. Tooth. And I think I will ask if Mr. Corton could respond to any of your comments right now. So if there's an answer to that, you could hear that.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, with respect to your input, that's why you're here today. That's your input. Anybody that's in the area, you have an opportunity to comment with respect to the development. The apartment allocation, I factored in this one along with Roars, along with all the others that I've dealt with over the last year as part of that allocation. Originally, when Larry Nygaard came in with their application, they had a significantly higher apartment, and also on the Myers one as well. And I told them that the allocation that I've referred to over the last year factored in roughly about 300 units for each of them. So that allocation is consistent to that. I'm keeping that as best we can to try not to overbuild, and that's based upon a population of 42 to 45,000. That we're trying to keep it at a 70% single family, 30% multifamily, or we could go down a little bit more, but roughly try to do that. compared to other cities which overbuild and multifamily, and you always have the problems when all's said and done with respect to that. I'm not sure what your last question is referring to. If you're referring to can you rezone, absolutely you could. The comprehensive plan is showing that area. Let's see the area that you would be included in. Actually, the area, well, you're right on the cusp of that. I couldn't tell you exactly if you're, because the area is red. We'd have to look at that, but irrespective if the area is considered as residential, which you could go to, the first year, if the commission wanted to, we could do a map amendment for that without it being unnecessarily delayed. So if you decided that you wanted to have commercial, we would look at it with the general, if this is approved and the rest, that commercial would make a lot of sense for that area. So, roughly I would probably be in favor of that.
Okay.
So I don't know if that helps you out with
All right.
respect to your question.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else in the public who'd like to make comment? Please feel free to come forward. Mr. Corton, on this zoning request, this is going to come under a PUD. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So adjacent properties, when it gets to the point of platting and actually describing lots and what they are, could take into consideration adjacent neighbors of this property if there was some special request. And it could be fit into the PUD if there was something that was concerning them, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the purpose of having the public hearing, is to take in comments. And I've provided my recommendations based upon my analysis of it, the application materials discussions with Mr. Decker, also the applicant itself. So you could augment them, you could add to them if you feel that there's additional conditions, or modify them, or remove them all as a commission. These are my recommendations to you.
Thank you.
And I have, as you've noticed, 25 with respect to that. As we move forward, just because I have 25 conditions, this is a big development that's not reflective of that. I have dire concerns of it. I have more time, and I'm taking the time to go through and look at design issues as part of our comprehensive plan. So this is going to be more reflective as we move forward on PUDs, to have more design components as part of the recommended conditions, as you've noticed within the staff report.
Thank you. This time, is there anyone else who'd like to make public comment? Please feel free to come forward. Glad to hear from you. Any comments from the commissioner?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson?
I'd like to reiterate the differentiation that you're making, Mr. Chairman, as well as Mr. Corton, that this is a PUD. The West Ridge development was more conventional zoning. So the PUD issue necessitates, I think, more of a discussion about layout issues and things like that. And maybe the best place to start is with the mobile home court part of it, because the plat is really going to be just a couple of big lots. We won't see these streets or any of these lots in the plat itself. A few comments here, but the one thing, and I maybe am saying this more for the developer than anybody else, but about a year ago we had a mobile home court in front of us, and there was a lot of conversation at that time about private streets. During the course of that, I heard at the city commission meeting a real dislike, an aversion to private streets. I don't know if that still exists. Maybe it will be seen as an entirely different project and all of that, but I think the developer needs to be aware of that. And I don't know how this board feels about the private street issues. All of us are a little snake bit, if you will, because of one or two examples we have in town of private streets in a manufactured home development that are really, really poor and nothing that our community is proud of. So that's affecting, I think, our thinking and maybe our decision making on this, but we do have to address it. I think I can be in favor of the private streets. But to do that, I think they need to be built to a good standard. And in other words, meaning that even though it won't be the city's responsibility, as a community, we still have to live with it. So if we start with a really good, solid street, it's going to take some of the risk away in seeing that situation that we don't like in our community today. I think I'm seeing in the plans a proposal for no concrete curb, and I think we have to second guess that myself. And I think we have to make sure that the rest of the street section is a section that we would build in the community. I'm not talking about widths. I recognize it's going to be a narrower width in the mobile home court, but I'm talking about thicknesses and drainage, those kinds of things. So I think you guys need to be aware that there has been some reluctance in the past, and then, you know, we can leave that up to staff as to that detail, but I want to make sure, at least I'm of the opinion, that we build a good street out there, that we start with something really good. I've got a few more comments.
Let me address a couple of those for you. Number one, the issue that you're bringing up was addressed with the city all the way back when Sean was here. And actually, in our PUD, we have language that should our private streets ever deteriorate to a level where they're unsafe, or they're, you know, some of the issues that we've had in other areas, that the city has a remedy to come in and repair those and charge those back to us. It was one of the things that we worked out with Sean when he was still here at the very beginning of this. He voiced those same concerns. As far as the road sections, we are building standard road sections. There's going to be curb and gutter in there. It's going to look very similar to any other neighborhood. We're putting in all the standard streets. The only different will be is we'll have a roll curb so that we can get units in and out. But otherwise, it will have curb and gutter everywhere.
Okay, and you know, forgive me for getting into this detail, but I think it's important. The way I read your plans, maybe I read them wrong. It didn't show a concrete curb and gutter in the mobile home court.
Was that? But we had roll curb in there.
Yeah. And I think that's going to, I think we'd all admit that that's a compromise in the street section. And then to back up a little bit, Brian.
Sure.
Are we saying that our PUD conditions will have in them?
In our developers agreement, our part of our PUD and our developers agreement, that condition is in there. It has been from the first time we submitted it.
I can't confirm that. I haven't taken a look. I haven't got to that point. You know, we've been crafting conditions, but in order to make sure that it's gonna be there, you know, at this point, we've acknowledged that the acceptance of it, I would just add that to the condition of a thickness or a style or whatever to be put on the PUD so that it's memorialized and it's not going to be dropped off due to all the other issues there.
Okay. We're fine with that, Gene.
The other thing I want to point out is that the developer is proposing what I think is kind of a unique layout, in that access to these lots is all going to be through alleys. The streets will not have driveways, for the most part. I guess there's some that will.
Some that do, yeah.
But for the most part, the streets won't have driveways on them, and I believe it's the intention to not have parking on the streets.
Correct.
So all that access is going to be in the alleys. I see a lot of positives with that. I think it's going to look better in those front yards and all. But I also, you know, think we have to recognize there's some very, very long blocks here. We're going to have 16-foot wide alleys that all that traffic's going to be on. And it's just something to contemplate. It's just intriguing to me. I think there's a lot of positives, but we should be aware of that. You know, I guess the other comment I'd make now is the same comment that I mean on Westridge, is that, and the developer and his engineer have acknowledged that we've got a lot of off-site improvements. They've shown a location for a water reservoir that may or may not be what the city wants. We're going to have to work with them on that. But But the biggest thing is the negotiation that we'll have in the coming weeks.
And we acknowledge that that's not a 60-day process.
Yeah, I know you do. And again, just to make sure we all understand, I sure don't see this happening in the time frame that we set out in our regs, is the main point I'm trying to make.
No, I mean, it's obviously it's in our best interest to get our development agreement done right. For us to do that, we're going to have to get the rest of the information from the city's engineers and so on, their consultants, so that we can get all the water models and everything else. And then we sit down with them, and before our final plat, we will have that. That's one of Ed's conditions, that we have all of that taken care of in our development agreement before the final plat comes back to you guys.
I'm not so much concerned about the actual layout, because I'm sure that Mr. Corton and the engineers will look at that. Of the trailer park, I did have questions about the streets, and we had extensive discussions about that in the last several years, about who owns the streets and the quality, the how they're going to be built, and who's going to maintain them, and safety. And are the lots going to be sold? They're going to be leased?
The lots will be leased. The roads will be owned by the park. The park will have 24-hour security. The park will have 24-hour maintenance. So we will have people patrolling the areas as far as parking issues, all of those types of things. We do our own snow removal, snow taking care of all the snow, lawns, everything. It's a full-service neighborhood.
And how many different plans or layouts do you have? I mean, we've seen these before, that they change and change. So, like I said, I'm not so worried about the specifics as far as the layout. But do you have quite a few different designs for this?
Yeah, and the one thing that's nice about what we're doing is that we will own all of the units in the mobile home park. So where, some of the other mobile home parks have to deal with, folks from Arizona are bringing one up and it's going to go on that site, so there's no real control over what color it was, what width it was, some of those types of things. Ours will be truly master planned. The units are all going to go in a phasing system. They'll all be owned by us. They're all going to be put in the program that we've discussed at different areas that we're calling a Fresh Start program, where we're going to help with credit counseling, credit repair, and a down payment assistance program. The idea behind Westwood Court, which is what that's called up there, is for it to be a bit of a feeder system for people that are coming into town with broken credit, bad credit, foreclosures, so on and so forth, as a means to get them into a home that's affordable, but then also get them out into the community, into a permanent single-family home where they put down roots within our community. We have a lot of acreage in town. We have a lot of single-family lots that we've got to go through, and the single biggest thing that we see isn't the lack of income to pay for a mortgage. I mean, if you have a job in Dickinson, for the most part, you can pay a mortgage in this town. And generally speaking, a mortgage is cheaper than rent, which we're kind of upside down in that world. So the idea was to try to solve some of that problems for folks that came in. It's also to solve some of the housing issues for our retailers. They're coming in, and it's real difficult for some of these big box people to deal with, typically paying cashiers or stockers or things like that. $10 in a lot of markets is high. Well, if they come to Dickinson and they're looking at 17. Well, even at 17, that person not necessarily can afford an apartment in our town. So it's got to a point where, for us to bring in retailers, this was one of the things that we did to try to offset some of their staffing concerns. It was a way for them to house staff that's close by. It's affordable. As part of that, just backtrack a little bit, as part of that Fresh Start program, we also have some income-based units that we're going to have a percentage of income-based units in there for some low-income people. It's just trying to solve some of the very urgent problem that Dickinson has right now.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions this time? Mr. Corton?
Mr. President, I just wanted to convey to the developer that, and we did this initially, that a mobile home park is dramatically different standards from a mobile home subdivision. And if you have any plans of doing this, any of selling those lots, your plan will not work. You know, the roads have to be, road configuration, everything would have to be revised. So I just want that to be on the record. So if 10 years from now you come back and want to do that, your utility lines won't work because now they'll be designed for a mobile home park compared to the subdivision. The lots will be, the roads will have to be dedicated, all that. So
That's understood. Thanks, Ed.
I'd
Thank
like
you,
to
Mr.
ask that
Corton.
question
Mr.
a
Jackson.
little bit differently. And I'd like to ask you specifically, do you have any plans to sell any of those mobile home lots?
Lots? No.
Okay. One other detailed question. It's not clear to me with the alleys. It looks like there might be an intent that the alleyways themselves will encroach onto the setback, which would, I suppose, be the rear yard setback.
It's possible in some of those areas. That would be that's part of the reason for the PUD. We also have, with the garage units that they each have, all the units have at least a single or a double garage attached. Some of those might encroach in some setbacks as well, so that's what part of the PUD. Those will be some exceptions.
Okay, well, we don't have to talk about it anymore, but I'd suggest you guys look at that. I don't know if we want, okay. Okay.
Thank you.
to answer your question, Mr. Jackson, yes, we had kind of talked about that. There may be, depending on the configuration of some of those, they may encroach in a typical setback for a rear, but as an encouragement and as an incentive to have alleys, you know, that only makes sense to me. I think that, you know, this park, the way it's designed, could be one that that other ones could use as a model, and that's our anticipation and hope on this one.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Krieg.
Just, you know, a couple things, I guess, you know, Gene probably hit on them, a couple of them, but, you know, as far as that mobile home park, I'm still in favor of a wider, at least perimeter road and maybe some spokes going through it as, you know, just access for fire trucks and whatnot. You know, I like the fact of the alleyways and in the garages in back, but it kind of begs the question of if I want to throw a Super Bowl party, where do my friends park? Or if I need to run over to a neighbor or something, you know, where do you park? You got a proposed, looks like 25-foot roadway there that, you know, there's no parking on, but, so, that, you know, get into some of those issues, but that's more detail, I guess, later on.
Thank you for raising awareness of that, and I would hope that the development has it in their plans as far as their contracts with the people who live there about situations of every sort, parking.
Yep, absolutely. As I said, one of the biggest things that's different from this, from a lot of other areas, is that since they are private, we do have the ability to have people towed. We do have the ability to levy fines. We do have ability to do all of that. And we do have a 24-hour security service within our business plan that will be going through this at all times. So when you get a really big fine, or you get your car towed for $300, it's probably not something you're going to do twice. As far as like Super Bowl parties, things like that, you'll see in there's several areas where we can do some grouped parking areas that are going to be at the end of blocks where we've got a lot of the green space. You see a lot of green space in the area. The plan there is to try to come up with a few grouped parking spots where we can have some people off-site. They're going to have to walk a little bit, but every house also has a double garage, so you know, they're going to have driveways in the back for people that come. And as far as the fire coming in and out with the alleyways in here, this area has better flexibility to get a fire truck in and through here than pretty much anywhere, because we've literally doubled the streets in this area as what a normal development would be.
Thank you very much. Any other comments at this time? Being none, I'll close the public portion. Oh, Mr. Soren, I'm sorry. Mr. Soren.
Sorry, I thought you were on the mobile home court. I'd like to go across the street. Sorry, Mr. Soren, Boundary Engineering. Thanks for the opportunity to ask a question. I guess one of the comments that I've got is there's a school that's shown as part of the planned unit development area. The question is that defined as part of that? Is that defined as park area? Or what are the chances of that being changed as that comes forward with the plat down the road.
Does anyone have the answer to that?
I can address that. Mr. Soren, with respect to that, it's been designated as a school site, or, you know, if it was a park, it'd be the same, in essence, same use. But if that went away, and there had been talks that maybe you can go, you know, on the east side of 30th, if the school site moved over there, they would have to come back and modify the PUD to include another land use, either single family, whatever that case would be, and that would be reviewed at a public hearing for anybody involved.
Okay, that's the part I wasn't sure if it was actually designated in the PUD as school or.
It's going to be shown as park or a school for that, and then part of the, if there's negotiations that that's going to be that, then that would be, those two will be the only two land uses. If it's not any of those, then they have to come back and modify it to include that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. Any other comments? Okay, this time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion on the rezone petition.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the request for rezoning of the described property from ag to PUD with the, I don't know how many conditions there are, but whatever number have been presented to us, that those conditions be included in the approval.
There's been a motion by Mr. Jackson. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Hanson. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I've been debating with myself about how to do this today, and you know, I guess I'm ready to vote in favor of the PUD, again recognizing that staff's going to need time to do a lot of work on this. I'm not sure I'm going to be in favor of approving the preliminary plat, and there are some things that I'll bring up during that, but I just want you all to know that. I'm comfortable, if the staff is comfortable, I'm comfortable moving forward with the PUD. I'm not sure I will be with the preliminary plat approval.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Any other comments on that, on the motion? No further discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend rezone. At this time, we have item 8 on the regular agenda. It's a preliminary plat. To consider a preliminary plat for Pinecrest. Site is generally described as government lots 1 and 2 and the east half of northwest quarter of section 31, township 140 north, range 96 west, and a portion of the northeast quarter of section 31, township 140 north, and range 96 west, and government lots 3 and 4, and the east half of the west quarter of section 30, township 140 north, and range 96 west. Site is approximately 322 acres. And this is the site that we've just discussed on a rezone. And I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Brian Bachman with the Meyer Real Estate Group. Pretty much the same thing. I guess just we'll stand for questions as far as plating.
Okay. This time I'd ask if anyone has any questions on the preliminary plat, please feel free to ask. Mr. Tooth, you're abstained.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
There are 3 things I want to bring up, 3 or 4 things that I think are really important to the ultimate layout, the ultimate platting here, and I tried to make the point during the PUD discussion that there is a portion of this we're not going to see the final plat again right away. So if we approve a preliminary plat now, it's going to miss the things I'm going to bring up. The first thing is, we heard during the previous agenda item with Westridge that 50th Avenue going to be a pretty significant street. Maybe there will be an interstate overhead someday, maybe not. Even without the interstate overhead, it's going to be a pretty significant street. This platting doesn't allow for 50th to come through to 21st. and I think it needs to. Topographically, if you go and look at it, it's looks like it's going to be a real simple thing to do, to bring 50th through. And what it would mean is that this developer would have to give us right-of-way on the very west edge of the development. It may even be desirable, and our engineering staff will have to look at that, but even north of 21st, to continue 50th. That's more of a challenge because of the oil facilities that are there and even the topography would make it more of a challenge. But I think that before we finalize this plat, I think that our staff has to at least look at that and say yay or nay. But south of 21st, I think we're going to find is a no-brainer, that we need that. The couple of other things that I'm concerned about is that, you know, the ground, I don't know how to describe it, the ground that would lie between the West Ridge property and this proposal, which I believe is a Frenzel farmstead, you know, is likely to be developed someday. I think it's important that there be some access from the streets in this proposal to that ground and/or to 50th, to the west. Not much access, but I think from a fire and emergency services standpoint, you know, I don't think we need 8 or 10 access points, but I think 2 or 3 would be in order, and we don't have that in the preliminary plat. Last thing I'd bring up, it's a little bit more of a detail, but I'm really confused about the right-of-way on 15th Street. This plat, this preliminary plat showing 2 different widths. We've already got 75 feet to the south, I believe. That just needs to be straightened out, and again, I know our engineering staff can look at that. But the point is, this all affects the preliminary plat. If we approve this preliminary plat today, it'll be on file in someplace at City Hall without these changes. I think the developer has acknowledged that it's going to take more than the 60 days to do this anyway. I think it's important to have a preliminary plat that shows these things, that shows 50th and these other connections. So I don't think it would hurt for us to continue the preliminary plat today, just because of those issues.
I agree. I think we need to get those things right now, or they're going to be a nightmare for the rest of somebody's lives for a long time. They need to be thought out and done. Anyone else have any comments on that?
If I may?
Yes.
Understand exactly where Mr. Jackson's going with those requests, but that area is not being platted. So those areas can easily be addressed when our phase 2 comes in, which is that area. So I guess I'm not seeing how that's affecting what our phase 1, what we're actually asking for a preliminary plat, and what our final plat request will be. One of our biggest challenges is with the retailers that we're working with. If we're not entitled, if we don't have preliminary plats and we don't have these things, and they understand the timeframes that everybody's working under here, but without that, it's real difficult for us to get things from handshake, wink, yeah, we're coming, to handshake, signature, checks being cashed, we know they're coming. So continuance for us on our phase 1 is difficult. That will have some nasty effects for us if that was to happen. That is why we've never, we've worked with city staff. I think Gene was at the one meeting where we told him exactly what phase 1 was. We knew that that area over there was gonna be a little more difficult because we have those planned for 32-foot roads again, and we just went through the Creekside exercise. So we just left that part out of our phase 1 and did the parts of phase 1 that are pending and being worked. The manufactured home park is something that we need to keep moving and move forward with so that we can try to get units in there this year. The retail issue is a very real issue for us, so that would be my only comment to that, as far as continuance. I mean, we understand. I can't even negotiate a development agreement today, even if we wanted to. Ed doesn't have the information, Sean doesn't have the information. It's just not available. So we won't be back for a final plat, obviously, until that is all done. And when we bring phase 2 in, we will address 50th, we will address any of those issues on that end. As far as getting through the Frenzel property, I can't promise you that right now. Wait till Menards opens up, and then maybe Les will not like the traffic, and he'll be a little more likely to let us do something. But those issues can be addressed when we bring back our phase 2.
I appreciate your comments, especially the last one, because even though you've got phase 1 and you're saying that some of this plat is not going to affect that, but moving forward, it's going to cause a lot of traffic if you're successful. Prior to any other accesses being determined or make sure they're going to be there in the future, maybe they should be there ahead of time. So I think it's important that that be mentioned, and if city and engineering decide that that's okay to do it, you know, that the agreements legally can be worked out, that's going to have to be talked about and settled. But I mean, I didn't receive some of this information until, was it Friday or Saturday? It was, you know, stated that an update and a narrative, we were unable to provide the city staff with a copy of this prior to the Wednesday's last Wednesday. So, I mean, I would like to hear comments from our staff, you know, the city staff, city planning, the engineering, about that, their opinions on that, on whether or not we should move forward with preliminary, and based on the fact that you need a preliminary for you people you're engaged with to say, yeah, they're coming. And am I correct that the preliminary pretty much is going to be considers the water, the retail, the apartments, the duplex, the townhouse, in that order? Okay. Mr. Corton, can I get some comments from you, please?
Sure. With respect to the preliminary plat, I've attached 21 conditions. They're broad enough. I think that they addressed enough of it to staff's, to my perspective, that you meet those conditions, then you move forward with a final plat on that. I've already had discussion prior to the meeting with Mr. Bachman, and they are very aware that, you know, 90 days is not realistic. You know, 90 days is a more realistic term. 60 is unrealistic. The 21 conditions that are proposed will take time to go through. But with respect to, do I feel comfortable if, based upon those conditions for preliminary plat approval, I do. But ultimately, that's your decision to make. That's my recommendation as a staff member. You as a commission, as a consensus, decide if you're comfortable with that. I've been working on this project for many, many months, unlike you that have had it for only 4 or 5 days. So ultimately, evaluate it with respect to my conditions, with the application materials, what you've heard today, and then make the best decision that you have. I'll support you either way.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
I was able to meet with the developer at least twice, maybe 3 times, which I really appreciate. I didn't get to do a real review until over the weekend. Spent a lot of hours over the weekend looking at this and noticing the things that I just brought up. The fact that we're not doing a final plat on that portion is just the reason that I think we should delay the preliminary plat. Normally, if the whole thing were being platted, we could count on this being fixed in the next couple months or whatever it takes to process the final plat. this could sit for years. This part that's not going to be part of the final plat could sit for years, and we won't have a record here of what's going on. I just don't think it's going to hurt that much. We've approved the PUD. I think the developer has the message that we're in general agreement with this plat. And I think these are significant things that we want to see on a final plat drawing, or on a preliminary plat drawing. Now, unless there's a way to limit our approval today to only the first phase portion, if we could do that and not approve the preliminary plat on that west portion, so that they have to come back with a new application for preliminary plat, I think that would be fine.
Is that acceptable to reduce the portion of approval
Absolutely.
for preliminary?
You could reduce, you can't increase, per the public noticing. So if you want to demarc, state a point, and generally delineate it, that would be fine. You could just say that that area is not approved, or I was going to suggest to you, Commissioner Jackson, would be that western portion, the portion in question. You were talking about, well, that can maybe hang out there for many years. You could place a timetable on it and say that we want the final plat for that within 2 years. If it's not submitted within 2 years, then that portion needs to come back and be replatted. Either or is a scenario in which you could do that. I believe that the developer would probably be in favor of, reducing that western edge in order to get the approval of that today.
Correct. The plan is to bring phase 2 with that housing area, and probably within late this summer.
But would that work for you, Brian? If we limit our preliminary plat approval
to phase 1, that would be great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
The only other thing I'd point out with the question of 50th, I suspect that south of 21st, it's not going to be hard to work that into that platting south of 21st. But if we were to require 50th extending north, which is less likely, I think that's going to be more of a hassle for you.
I don't know how you do it. You're going to go right through the middle of that tank farm.
Well, I think it can be done. It's not perfect, but
I guess
I guess that can be taken.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
I guess that can be taken care of between now and the final plat, if we were to decide that we needed right of way.
For 50th going north, yes, we could. I'll just state it for the record. I'm not in favor, based upon our comp plan, what we've done for the last year and a half, to go any further west or any further north than what has been depicted. That is our extremities of our urban service area and our comp plan. Going, 50th going north, I would not be in favor of it, just based upon that going further to the west or to the north, I would not recommend us moving any further, and therefore that extension of 50th to the north would be unnecessary based upon our comp plan. But that would just be my opinion with respect to that.
And I believe you, and I might agree with you, but we have different boards to deal with, and different people have different opinions. So, but I think we can take care of that between the preliminary and final.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Agree.
Again, we're abutting existing residents there, and I'd like to hear what they have to say. And we're approving a plat that would abut right up to them with, commercial to residential. So I'm still a little up in the air at that, I guess. But I would like to hear from those residents. I don't believe we had our public.
Not yet. Any other comments or questions at this time for the developer? Being none, if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this preliminary plat, please feel free to come up.
Doug Decker, 1603 30th Avenue West. I haven't seen any pictures or diagrams on what Phase 1 consists of. The way I understand it, from what it's stated, it would just be to the south of me. I have a question on how I'm going to access my property when 30th Avenue gets built, or widened, I should say. That's a concern. Also, what Mr. Krieg stated, having commercial on both sides, I feel is kind of a unique situation in Dickinson in a new development. I know Mr. Corton said there will be some limitations on what they do. And then on their Phase 1, where does the north-south road run? Which side of the trees is that on?
It's on the back.
It's on the back side?
This is Phase 1. Your access road would be right here, just on the south side of you, where you'd have access in here.
Is that on 30th?
That'll have to be off of 30th.
Off of 30th?
Off of 30th, because you'll have a 30th, there'll be a 30th entrance here, 30th entrance here, take a 30th entrance here.
So that's not a frontage road?
No, it's not a frontage road. So you'll have,
Okay.
you'll be able to come directly off of 30th and right into your driveway.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jeffrey.
could I jump in here and Brian, because I think we really need to know this for sure. You do intend to plat the ground north of Mr. Decker?
Correct.
That's included in the plat. So I think the sheet that shows the Phase 1 is sheet 14 of your drawings. It's the only place I can find it. And you've got it labeled as View D and E. Is that correct? Is that what would be?
Which sheet is it?
I think he had it.
Did I?
That and the ground north of 21st, of course, would be what we're approving today as a preliminary plat.
Correct.
Sheet 14, and you've got it labeled View D and View E.
Yeah, it's 15. It goes basically, follows this road.
So it's nowhere near me?
No, it's everything up to this road.
Is that plus what's north of 21st going to be the boundary of what we're approving today?
On the side of the trees.
It's on the back side of the trees. It doesn't go through your property.
Okay.
It can't.
Right.
They're too small cul-de-sacs.
The intent was for all of that retail area, north and south of Mr. Decker's, to be approved today.
Yes.
Correct. With the need to come back with a final
That road is on
plan
the east side of
if
the
he were not
trees,
participating
and it
and
just
how
won't-
that would
it
work.
won't go through.
But if we approve a preliminary plat that's something less than what you anticipated, we have to define that somehow. So
Yeah,
I
you-
think
Not
your
directly.
intent is
As soon
what's
as
shown
I have line
on that
up,
sheet.
that's your direct.
Right.
So you're gonna get one. We have an entrance
Except
coming
for
in
his
here.
parcel. His parcel
Except
is
for his
an
parcel.
exception to the cement.
Yes.
Right there. We
So
put
he
it-
would
we
not
asked
be
for it on
included.
purpose to right
Yes.
next to you.
And
So then you'll just come in.
when we come back with final,
The gate. right
there'll
there.
certainly need to be
You'll just come out
modification
that
if he's
way.
not participating.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense, yes, it does.
What does it?
It gives consideration to Mr. Decker.
You didn't want to develop.
And
This is all-
his
you don't have to
access
bring
and
that
his
road.
property.
Yeah, you don't have to do that.
Yep.
As a participant, you don't want to participate.
Yeah, or another way to say it would be everything except what's shown as View C.
Right.
Everything except View C.
Correct. Right.
Yeah, and the Decker property and the Two's property.
Correct, yes.
Mr. Decker, did that answer your question? You think?
Somewhat,
Or
yes, I think.
was it satisfactory, though?
Yeah, yeah. And then you guys comment on the trees, preserving the trees?
Yeah, yours also.
Right. Well, isn't that in my property anyway, the
Mhm.
trees?
Yeah, as far as I know, I think on the survey.
So why do you guys say preserving the
It was
trees?
one of Ed's conditions that
Oh.
we make sure that we don't
Gotcha.
touch your trees.
Okay, okay.
And you can't cut them down either.
I don't want to, no, I want them there, I want them all there yet. Yeah, I guess that was the main thing, was when that 30th Avenue gets widened, that I'm gonna have access. Now, it will be a frontage road?
No,
I'll have direct access.
you'll have direct on the side. Yes.
With respect to, I can answer that. As I talked to you earlier this week, the condition on there would be that the trees would be preserved 10 feet from your property line. All those trees would be surveyed and preserved. They would build a 6-foot opaque vinyl fence or greater quality, and I'll let you discuss that with them, but that would be the minimum standard for it. And then also the developer will have to provide a electronic gate for you, a gate so you can get in there. The access issue, as I've mentioned, would be DOT is only going to allow 2 access points into this entire area off of 30th. The city engineer will decide the most direct route after getting off. So in essence, you will enter into their development, and then the first opportunity to take a right, it will be a direct access, in essence going through their parking lot directly to your property. And that's why I wanted to have a gate there, so that you wouldn't have the, and that's your call. If you don't want a gate, that's fine.
No, I do.
I think for privacy purposes, for people not to come into your property. And that can either be from the north or south, and that could be decided, you know, whichever is the most appropriate one. The north commercial piece, which would be the piece, there's going to be one access point off of 30th to your north, and then one to the south. Whichever one would be the direct route, and I would let that be up to your choosing as well, and we could iron that issue out as part of the development agreement. So I hope that's satisfactory.
Yep, yep. When does this all happen? Like the fence, or as soon as they start developing, or?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. We'll put the timing on there that the fence needs to be up there essentially right around the time that either before or immediately after the grading of that. And I'll kind of let that be up to you to decide with respect to that. Grading, you can have, even though you're doing as much of the, they're doing as much as they can to prevent that due to the soils and the rest, maybe having the fence put up there prior to it, because they're not going to be grading any of that area. That would be on your side. So to help abate the dust that potentially could fly on your property, that would be reasonable to have that at the time. So.
All right.
I
And
can
then-
work with you with respect to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's all I have questions on right now, because this is just the preliminary.
Right.
And how many meetings do they have to go through before it's final?
Well, there'll be a final here, and then it goes to the city commission.
Right.
And that they will actually approve or disapprove it, or?
And the final is when?
The final on this one might be.
The final is at least 90 days away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say.
So there won't be anything, I mean, I can't say there won't be anything, but,
Well, Mr. Chairman, I could just let Mr. Decker know that we will be working on a development agreement as part of the PUD. The final PUD, I could specify the time periods. I would hope the applicant would be working with you. Otherwise, that issue could be resolved at that point. So, you know, when this comes forward for the final approval, there will be a development agreement, and you, as anybody else, could comment with respect to that as well.
Okay, so I'll have another chance to comment if I have
Yes,
questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
thank you very much, Mr. Decker.
Mr. Chairman? I
Yes,
have a
Mr. Krieg.
question for Mr. Decker. If he-
Oh, Mr. Decker?
Yeah.
Mr. Krieg, go ahead.
You know, Doug, I just, I'm looking at this, and I commend the developer for bringing in an overall plan, but I got to ask the question, is there any intent of selling? And again, you don't have to answer, but, I mean, I know you just built a house out there and everything,
Right.
so I'm just curious. I mean, if not, do we need to relook at something, you know, avoiding those areas out? Because right now it's built right through it.
Well, I would say as of now, there's, you know,
No?
I'm not. So.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with respect to Commissioner's Creek question, before the final PUD approval would be, as noted as part of the condition, the total square footage, the residential, and the map associated with that would all be finalized. At the time that it's finalized, if they have not come to an agreement, or if Mr. Decker decides to retain the property, then that will be omitted from the final map that will be part of that.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone else in the public who would like to make comment, please feel free to come forward. Any other comments from the commission? Mr. Corton, do you have any other comments on this? This time I'll close the public portion of this hearing. I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the preliminary plat of the Pine Crest, are we calling it the Pine Crest Edition? But accepting what's shown as View C on sheet 14 of the developer's submittal.
Okay, this will be the abbreviated recommendation for the preliminary plat, abbreviated preliminary plat. Is there a second to that?
And of course, including the conditions that staff has shown.
Mr. Kovacs was second. Is there any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommended. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. This time we'll take a 3-minute recess. Adjourn. And at this time, we're going to have we're going to honor a request from Mr. Jacobson to please come and we'll hear his comments.
Thank you for this, Commissioners, for this late notice thing, and I'll be brief. Dale Jacobson, Jacobson Music. I'm looking for input today about adding some living quarters to the existing building at 1067 3rd Avenue West here, which is our current building. We have some potential for some additions. We haven't possibly adding to the portion of it going up, and possibly a space on the main floor that's existing. But our concern is with employees and being able to afford to maintain the people we have. And we're building people to do some management as I slowly retire and so forth. And I'm just wanting to know if this is something that would be possible, first of all, and second of all, what I would need to do as far as procedures. The next door neighbor is the Callahans, who have both a business and a commercial business and living quarters, State Farm Insurance, and behind me is an empty lot and one residential home. So it's kind of a mixed bag there, and I just would like to get some information on how to proceed.
I would say I think it's a good idea. I think it's an acceptable idea. It's like a mixed use. It's like something you find in a lot of cities where people have businesses. They live there, they work there, it's their lives, and you're already adjacent to commercial, you're adjacent to residential. It's already being mixed. I would say to proceed with drawing up a plan, and then basically if it fits the requirements of parking and all that, and the parking for the business, and that no one else has a greater objection to it, I think you should discuss it thoroughly and a fairly good plan with Mr. Corton. Anyone else have comments on this?
Mr. Chairman, I could just talk about some background. Mr. Jacobson, I think, came to me initially probably about a year ago. You know, we had talked about this, and I had told him in the CC zone and in our commercial zones that we do not allow living quarters, and that would require a zoning text amendment. You know, we have a crew camp ordinance, but that is for a bigger facility. But we do not have anywhere in our commercial code to allow either for a caretaker's portion or for employees as part of that. And I said, well, you could propose a text amendment and bring it forth. Any citizen can do that, and then we would evaluate it and decide yes or no to that issue. I encourage them to come today just to bring the issue up and see if there is any desire from the commission to entertain something like that. It would require an amendment to the zoning code to allow that. We would have to put appropriate conditions to it. I have mixed feelings for it. It's difficult. It would be extremely difficult to enforce. Some people would hear, oh, I hear that you could do that, and then there would be potentially a proliferation of people that would just start to convert them. Our fire department sees on occasion people living in commercial buildings and notes that, and lets us know that, and we go through that process to correct that issue. But I also see there's a need as well. So I guess my question to the commission, and this is generally open, is there a desire to entertain either a caretaker's or an employee to live in a commercial one? And an example would be, in times past, I've had it where mini storages, you would have a caretaker home or residence as part of the mini storage facility. You'll see that around the nation where the manager actually lives on site in order to take care of that. Currently in our code, we do not allow that. Do we want to entertain something to that nature? And if we do we allow it to just be the owner of the facility and not employees or anybody else? Or do we allow it to be the owner and maybe one employee to the site as either an administrative approval or something of that nature? Those issues we could ferret out, but I guess conceptually or philosophically, is there at all a desire from the commission to look into that issue? And if there is, then that's something that we could work on. We could work on over the next several months and see what we want to do. There's various ways to cut that pie. It could be designate specific areas just for that, in areas that have already existing residential and commercial uses kind of intermixed where Mr. Jacobson's is at, or broadly just brush it across a CC zone. So there's various ways to address that. And I'm here today just to see if there is any desire on the commission to look into that over the next several months to a year.
Thank you, Mr. Croton. Yes, Mr. Hans.
Didn't we approve something on Oliver Commons similar to this already?
Oliver Commons was part of a PUD, and our PUD ordinance has it, you have to be a minimum 2 acres. We don't want to do this piecemeal one little one. Now, I don't know if, this area could be delineated and say this area along with others could have that ability, and then separate it that way. We could do that. But that could be part of the discussion. I guess the first part, are we open to that idea? And then we could discuss the parameters later.
Well, in Mr. Croton, didn't we approve one, wasn't it the bed and breakfast on Highway 22? Didn't that get converted to something similar to what we're looking at here?
Yeah. Yes.
We did that a year ago. That was an R3.
That was an in-home business, or what's the terminology?
It was a bed and breakfast.
Yeah, we did that as a home occupation kind of slash. It was an odd one to do it that way. This really doesn't fit into that because that allowed that in that zone. The commercial one does not. So, I mean, we can modify it accordingly, and I'm fine with doing that. I guess the question is, are we open to the discussion and we could address those issues? I'm open to it. I think that we probably need to do it. There are pros and cons, obviously, with respect to that, and we can narrow it down to where we feel comfortable. So,
I guess I would.
Mr. Jackson?
I'm sure open to the discussion. When we did the Oliver Commons thing, I thought that was a nice concept. I realize that's new and, maybe a different deal, but I'm sure open to the.
Okay.
Mr. Jacobson, did you have anything else to say?
Just
one time?
what I can do to proceed would be the only other things, whatever. If it took time to do it, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would take some discussion, and I'm open to the discussion. It looks like there's a consensus here that, my opinion is it's no different than you got to run in the business in your home or home in your business. What's the difference? And there's already that situation right next to you.
That's a downtown.
Okay.
So should I
would
continue?
I would proceed with discussions with Mr. Croton.
Yes.
And he'll.
If we're open as a commission, I could see if I could bring forth some ideas next month. If not, the month after that, depending on my schedule. This will take a little bit of time, Mr. Jacobson.
Yep.
So allow us that, you know, that have some patience with respect to that. But I think in general, if I'm reading everybody right, we're open, but we want to feel comfortable with the idea, and I'm more than happy to play with our ordinance to make it work within certain parameters. So we could have this as part of a discussion item next month if you like at the very end, similar to what we're going to do for signs. And I can bring forth some material.
That will be good for me.
Thank
You know, the
very
only
much.
other thing I'd
Jack?
throw in is that I know Williston has seen a lot of this, and recently they've been resisting it. I think they just did some ordinance or something resisting just this kind of thing. So we do need to look at it, make sure it's done right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chairman, yeah.
Yes,
and-
Mr. Krieg.
Just to follow up on that, I'm open to it because of the location.
Yeah.
You know, as we mentioned, I don't think we want an influx of every place in town that's happening, but, you know, this is, like I said, a mixed bag there, so I think it would fit well.
Thank you, Mr. Krieg. This time we have item 9 on our agenda, is a zoning text amendment. And we're going to get a rough draft at this point in time from Mr. Josephson and some brief comments and something for us to digest in the next month or 2 or 3.
While Mr. Josephson's getting ready, I'll recommend denial on the first thing, if I get a second.
Yes, obviously, we're not gonna have a public discussion of this today, but I'm handing out, it's a draft of revisions to the sign code to look at between now and the next hearing, and we still have to do some internal staff review. But I want to hand it out and then go over some of the concepts that we're looking at as part of this. And again, what you see next month, what comes back next month, there may be some significant changes, but at least this is something to start on. So this is a proposal to make some changes to the existing sign ordinance, and I just wanted to cover some of the highlights of them. One of them would be the requirement of a sign plan or unified sign plan as part of the permitting process, and this would be the applicant would submit a site drawing indicating any existing signs and where they're proposing to put any new signs on site, so that can be reviewed during the permitting process. Also, one of the requirements would be that signs would be designed to include architectural features of the building on the site. Their pole sign height would be a function of roadway type instead of zoning district. It would allow for increases in monument size height based upon an increase in setback from property line from roadways. Aggregate areas would be based on a sign type and not necessarily, currently they're based on zoning district. Also, one thing that we will need to think of in the future, and this leaves this open, is the opportunity in certain districts, like in the downtown area or any other special areas that we may study, to have any specific sign regulations that would be specific to the downtown area. I noticed going through here under the current code, there's a limitation. I believe there's a limitation in size and height for DC zoning, and we may want to look at that in the future for the downtown area, certain design features. It's not in here now, but those are things that the city can definitely look at. So I would just ask you to take some time, look this over, get in touch with me or with Ed if you have any comments, and we'll do internal review and come back with something prior to the next meeting. But what I have here is I've looked at a number of codes elsewhere and consulted with sign professional, and this is one that I believe it's easy to understand and work with, both for sign professionals and also for city staff and anybody else who wants to know what regulations would be.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Joseph.
please take some time, look it over, and
Yeah.
provide me or Ed with your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Is there a motion to adjourn? The motion adjourned, second? All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.